Uh, Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Citizens Advice Portsmouth 2022 Annual Conference. Thank you for joining us. My name's Tom Little. I am a trustee here at Citizens Advice Portsmouth, have been so for, I think, the last 6 months. It's a privilege to be on the board of such a great, prestigious and worthwhile charity. And along with everyone else on the board, obviously, we welcome you to our annual conference. I'm going to be facilitating today. By that, I mean doing the intros and diving between the slides. So with that in mind, we're just going to move on to some quick housekeeping parts and also a little bit of the run order and agenda today before I hand over to the main crux of the meeting. So we are recording the meeting, which I'm hoping you would all have had a little ribbon on the top that tells you that. So obviously that will be available for people who want to have a look or a copy of that after the event in case you missed anything. All participants, so everyone who's joined, will be automatically muted and cameras off. That's just to make it easier for people kind of viewing, so we don't get any people talking over each other or too much happening on the screen at once. Obviously, anyone who wants to ask a question or as a comment, the chat function is enabled. For those of you know, we were hoping to do this face-to-face, obviously at Portsmouth Library, so because of the situation, we've obviously had to pivot slightly. So, you know, you'll have to forgive us if we have a little bit of clunkiness between the transitions, but I'm sure we won't, and we will get to any questions that are raised where we've got some time dedicated where we'll review back and make sure we don't miss anyone's comment. Put your questions in the chat bar, because I think, as we said here, raising the hand function won't work during the time. So we have the running order for today. It's going to start obviously in a minute. We'll hand over to Sandy to do the welcome from our CEO. As you can see on screen, we've got a variety of talks in covering wellbeing, citizen advice, what our purpose is, going all the way through to some lightning talks from the team, which will take us to a planned break at 10:45, or we will try our hardest to make sure we get there and give you guys a little bit of a break in between, because obviously it is a packed and very interesting session. And then after the break, we're going to have our guest speakers. So Dr. Thomas Richardson is going to come in, give us a talk about the impact of money on health. Then moving back towards the tail end of the session, we've got some more sessions on well-being, a little bit about our own people here at CAP, another external speaker in Lizzie Butcher, who's going to talk to us about workplace health and well-being. And then we're going to plan to kind of for 12:20 get to wrapping it up with some final comments from our chair of the trustees in Steph. So a little bit ahead of schedule, but we're going to hand over to Sandy in a little bit to give us a little bit of an overview. Now, Sandy is our amazing Chief Executive Officer here at Citizens Advice Portsmouth, loved by all. She's got a wealth of experience at Citizens Advice, starting as from a client to all of these roles you can see on screen, to everything she's done there. A qualified lawyer and qualified vet, but I'm sure all of us, the only thing we've seen there is more interesting is about the owning and breeding miniature smooth-haired dachshunds, which at some point, Sandy, we're going to have to investigate a little bit more to see what that involves. So I'm going to hand over, hopefully I'm going to go off camera now, and then Sandy will come on, and just like that, it will happen like magic. So here it goes.
Thanks, Tom, for that introduction. And good morning, everyone, and welcome to Citizens Advice Portsmouth Annual Conference 2022, Wellbeing in the New Normal. It's lovely to see all of you here. I know you all have busy diaries, so attending conferences, no matter how much we want to go, tend to be the last thing on our list of priorities. So thank you for making the time for us. I hope that you'll find this morning interesting and informative, and we'll be pleased that you spared the time to come. As Tom has already said, our intention was to hold this event face-to-face at Portsmouth Central Library, as we have done before, and we plan to provide you all with good coffee and delicious pastries. But sadly, when we saw COVID cases spiking and government guidelines changing, we had to make the decision to make the event online. So no tasty treats, I'm afraid. Hopefully we can make up for this next year. We struggled thinking of the right theme for this year's conference. So we had several long discussions about what we felt had been the prominent themes of last year. Obviously, we had to deal with the impact of COVID-19 and the many challenges and concerns that it created, just like everyone else. but it had required such significant changes to how we do pretty much everything. It was hard to know where to start. And then it hit us. It was well-being. We had focused so much time and energy into well-being. The well-being of our clients, the well-being of our advisors, the well-being of the rest of our teams, including our leadership team, and the well-being of our friends and colleagues in the many organisations we work with. COVID-19 has affected every one of us in some way. So this morning, you'll hear about how we, as an organisation, have focused on our team's well-being, as well as hearing about the work that we do, which contributes hugely to the well-being of our clients. You'll also hear from two great speakers, both with a different well-being theme. So I don't want to delay proceedings any further, and I'll pass you back over to Tom, our brilliant compere. Enjoy.
Okay, thanks for that, Sandy. Let's get straight into it. So now I believe I'm going to hand over to Karen Wilkins, who's going to give us a bit of a chat about well-being. What is it? Karen's done a lot of work as well, along with everyone else involved in getting the slides and decks together. So thanks very much for that, Karen. And hopefully you should be good to go.
Lovely, thank you. So hi, I'm Karen. I joined Citizens Advice Portsmouth as a volunteer about 3 years ago, and I actually work in the business development team. And what that involves is raising funds to help support our work at Citizens Advice. I also work with the team internally to help develop our business plans. And also we're very much involved in communication. So communication both externally to share with others what we do and help educate and make people aware of our services. And we do that, as I said, by writing articles and things like the Portsmouth News. And also internal communication is really important as well. So we spend a lot of time trying to involve our people, both with socials and with blogs and things like that. I'm actually a scientist by my background, and I worked for my career was based working for Paul Corporation, a very large employer in Portsmouth. I was very fortunate. I had a job that took me all around the world. But now here I am. I still love traveling. Last year, obviously, things were a bit limited, but I am hoping that this year the world opens up again and I can get back to what I love doing. So next slide, please, Tom. So I think we're all aware that the world has very much changed over the last couple of years. I think pre-2020, well-being was on the agenda of organisations, but I would not say it was considered to be a real priority. 2020, 2021, we had the pandemic. We had all around the world economic meltdown, a lot of issues with racial injustice, polarisation of politics, and also a mental wellness crisis, which really changed every aspect of human life. And the pandemic really focused us on that. And I think what's quite interesting is that many people now are actually talking about perhaps the next global health crisis could well be a mental health pandemic. So reportedly 7 out of 10 people are globally suffering with mental health issues. We all know that people die from COVID-19, but particularly, and this is a report from America, people are dying from what they call obviously depression, but also anxiety disorders. And there is a huge increase in deaths from suicide and what they call deaths of despair. So people dying as a result of episodes associated with addiction to drugs or alcohol or whatever. Next slide, please. So what actually do we mean by well-being? I think if you talk to many people, they'd have a different idea of what well-being means. But actually, if we look at the Oxford English Dictionary, well-being is defined as being the state of being or doing well in life. Next slide. Being a scientist, I love organisations like Gallup. Probably everybody's heard of Gallup, but that are linked to the polls, etc. But it's a very scientifically based organisation that does a lot of research into areas of what things are important in our life. And recently they've been focusing a lot on well-being and what they consider to be the 5 elements of well-being. So what do people need to thrive in their lives? They've actually studied over 98% of the world's population and found 5 main things. So career well-being is the thing you like what you have to do every day. Social well-being, that you have meaningful friendships in your life. Financial well-being, you manage your money well. Physical well-being, you have the energy to do things. And community, you like where you live. And I think what's interesting is career well-being is actually seen as being the most important of those 5 elements. And of that, employee engagement, so how engaged a person feels with the organisation they work for, is the single biggest driver of career well-being. And I'll come back to that. Now, what's quite interesting is that actually well-being, there is a kind of engagement paradox going on here, because a lot of people have said that working from home during COVID has actually been a very positive thing, and it has actually led to increased engagement with reported engagement with people with their organisations, but it's also markedly increased a lot of negative emotions such as stress and worry, which organisations really need to be cognizant about ongoing. A bit closer to home, the Office of National Statistics actually provides measures of national well-being, and they monitor and report how the UK is doing by these accepted and trusted measures for different areas of life for the UK public. And they describe, quoted, "We describe well-being as how we are doing as individuals, as communities and as a nation, and how sustainable that is for the future." They've actually produced, they believe that there's 10 dimensions of well-being. So personal well-being, so your satisfaction with life, whether you think that what you do is worthwhile. Your relationships, so satisfaction both with your personal relationships, and also takes into account feelings of loneliness. Health, this includes both subjective and objective measures of physical and mental health. What we do includes work and leisure and the balance in between them. Where we live, so not only does it include the dwelling that we have, but also the community in which we find ourselves. Personal finance, so that includes household income, the distribution of wealth and the stability of our finances. The economy, so that provides a very important context for national well-being. So it includes measures of inflation and public sector debt. Education and skills, so it measures obviously education and the stock of human capital in the labour market, with also some information about the levels of educational achievement and skills. Governance, so democracy and the trust that we have or don't have in our institutions, which may be very apt at this moment in time. And lastly, and probably maybe the most important at the moment, is the environment. So it does take into account things like climate change, the national environment we find ourselves in, and also the effects that our activities have on the global environment. Next slide, please. The Office of National Statistics actually does publish data every quarter that allows you to both see things not only at a national level, but also at a local level. And perhaps not surprisingly, data from April 2020 to 21, which was actually published in October in 21, shows that average ratings of well-being have deteriorated across all indicators. And that is continuing a trend that was seen previously, but has become even more obvious due to COVID-19. And as I state here, it's actually the largest annual decline since measuring started, so hugely significant. And what we can see is that both personal well-being has decreased, anxiety has increased, happiness has decreased, and feeling that things done in life are worthwhile has also decreased. So very worrying situations. Also, there's a study that was published in May last year looking at the personal and economic well-being in Great Britain. And again, interestingly, they found that groups that were most financially impacted at the start of the pandemic were still people who were worse off the middle of last year. So particularly, for example, people like the self-employed people were 3 times likely to report a reduced income and 2 times as likely to have used their savings to cover living costs compared to the unemployed. And again, perhaps not surprising, as always, it's the people who have least in society who tend to suffer most in these situations. So people in the lowest income bracket continue to be more likely to report negative impacts to personal well-being compared to those in the higher bracket. So the pandemic making their mental health worse, or feeling stressed or anxious. Coronavirus, gosh, hasn't that impacted us all? Again, being measured by the Office of National Statistics. And this is looking really at financial impact. Again, none of us should be surprised to read this. 65% of adults reported that their cost of living had increased over the last month. The most common, food shopping, gas and electric, and the price of fuel. And these increases are going to have a huge impact on how people are impacted and the type of people and the problems that they have ongoing, and how we as Citizens Advice will be able to help them. Interesting, and finally, at an employee level, even in 2021, 72% of employees rated well-being as their top priority. And that's from the Chartered Management Institute, which again is a very well-respected national organisation. It's also the right thing to do to look after well-being. Not only is it the right thing to do, it makes financial sense. Research from Deloitte, again, huge global consultancy organisation, has found that poor mental health alone costs the UK employers up to £45 billion per year. So makes sense to do something. And finally, what I would say is, I mentioned at the beginning how important employee engagement is to career well-being, which is a huge impact in terms of overall well-being. And again, many organisations are realising now that they really need to go back to basics. They need to focus on their purpose, their values and their vision. They need to make sure that everyone is aligned in the organisation. Everybody knows what their role is and how they contribute to the success and how they help people, and particularly for us at Citizens Advice, how we help clients in our community. It's really essential to ensure that everyone is connected in a shared journey ongoing. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you for that. I think there's some hugely relatable points there that we all would have felt over the last year or so. Working from home, I personally, it's been interesting, especially when you throw children into the mix and homeschooling. So I'm not quite sure how you can describe the last 12 months if you had an alien land on Earth and say, here's what's happened. With that, I'll hand back over to Sandy, who's going to give a little bit on our purpose, values, vision, and the clients we support.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, as Tom says, I'm going to spend the next few minutes telling you a little bit more about our charity and our purpose, values and vision. So moving straight on to the next slide. Who are we? We are part of a network of charities, a community, providing free and confidential advice in person, on the telephone or online. People rely on us because we're independent and totally impartial. We use the words in that first paragraph here often. For example, you'll see it in our articles in the Portsmouth News and on our social media platforms. We feel these words explain us clearly, and we want to keep getting this message out there. Citizens Advice Portsmouth started operation on the 4th of September 1939, the day after World War II was declared, and was one of the initial 200 Citizens Advice locations set up in the UK. Throughout our history, we've continued our unwavering support to those in need in the city, right up to the present day, simply because we know you're relying on us. Thanks, Tom. Next slide. So what's our purpose? Our purpose is to provide free, confidential advice to help people overcome their problems and to campaign on big issues when their voices need to be heard. We're only a small organisation, but we have a massive and meaningful purpose, and we're really proud of this. We change people's lives for the better. We make a tangible difference to those who seek our help, and it's really fulfilling. Okay, next slide, Tom. Thank you. Our values. So our values are the essence of who we are and the drivers for how we behave individually and as a whole. We're purpose-driven, so we're driven by the very words that I just read out in the last slide. We are always focused on those who need our help. We're people-focused. We recognise, value and reward contributions and talents in an open, fair and meaningful way. We're collaborative. We build relationships across teams and locations to foster innovation and inclusive ways of working. And we're transparent. We're open and honest, sharing information early and often whenever we can. And next slide. Our goals. So our goals are to evolve what we do, engage our team and support our community. If nothing else, these last 14 months have clearly shown us that the community we serve has ever-changing needs. So it's important that we recognise and respond to these changes by constantly evolving what we deliver. In order to be successful at doing this, we must ensure we bring our amazing teams along with us. And most importantly, we want to support our community. We want the people of Portsmouth to feel comforted in the knowledge that they have access to an outstanding advice service, one that has the ability to support them with their issue. We want them to know that they will receive the level of support they require, and no matter how complex their issue is, we have the expertise to deal with it. Equality, diversity and inclusion is also of utmost importance to citizens' advice, from trustee level down. We must be diverse in the way we deliver advice by varying the channel of delivery and adjusting the level of individual support we offer. We will keep improving our service so it meets the needs of everyone in Portsmouth's diverse community. In the last few years, we've been constantly improving and evolving in response to a rapidly changing landscape, which results in rapidly changing client needs. The last 12 months have been no different. But if I had to pick one change that excites me the most, it would have to be the significant development of our immigration advice service. In just a couple of years, we've evolved from having just a couple of volunteers who were trained to give solid low-level immigration advice to having a dedicated team of paid and volunteer advisors, some of whom are qualified to the highest level. This team are solidly supporting many refugees and asylum seekers in Portsmouth to make the most complex applications to the Home Office. This is making such a difference. We have also developed partnerships with organisations like City of Sanctuary, Red Cross and Friends Without Borders to enable us to support so many more people affected by immigration issues far more effectively. If we want our teams to remain engaged, we need to continue to focus on wellness and morale. So we recently undertook a team wellbeing survey to help us identify areas for improvement and hear the opinions and suggestions of our team. We listened to team feedback and have made significant improvements as a result. We've given our teams more opportunities to socialise at work. We've changed the way we communicate with our teams. We've improved our appraisal system and invested in training, as we want to make sure we are utilising the skills of our team in the most effective way. And we've worked hard to ensure that every member of our team knows exactly where they fit into the organisation and understands the importance of the role they play. Finally, if we want to continue to give the best support to our community, we must constantly collect and listen to customer feedback. It's essential that we consistently deliver a service of the highest quality. Our research and campaigns activity is becoming more critical by the day, and we have been heavily focusing on developing this part of our work in order to make it even more effective, both locally and nationally. We recently undertook some local research into client fulfilment of food vouchers at food banks, as we noticed that this was low and wanted to understand the reasons why. Part of this research involved a comparison of our Portsmouth data with our national network data to see if this was just an issue in Portsmouth or was widespread. Being part of a national network gives us the ability to do so much more for Portsmouth than if we were one isolated organisation, and we need to use this advantage to its best effect. We've worked hard at really understanding our community needs, which has already also involved a huge amount of research work. We are building more and more strategic partnerships with our other VCSE organisations, businesses and community groups, as we know there is so much strength to be had from working together and ensuring we're not duplicating but complementing each other's services. I won't say next slide, Tom, because we're on the next one, but that's brilliant. Okay, so this just shows you a little bit more about what we do for the community. And I think the figures show you just how hard we've been working for our community. So the last financial year, we dealt with 28,603 client issues and handled an astonishing 4.1 million in individual client debts. You can see here how much of our advice had to be delivered via remote platforms. This was obviously due to the limitations of COVID-19 and the need for us to protect the safety of both our clients and our advisors. COVID-19 has meant that we have had to find many innovative ways to interact with our clients. For example, we've used visualizers to enable instant document sharing, facilitated video calling from clients in our office to advisors in their homes, operated flexible hours to meet more demand, and as a result, we've managed to advise all who approached us effectively. And despite all these challenges, we're proud to say that we've remained open for face-to-face appointments and drop-ins pretty much throughout the entire pandemic, so our most vulnerable residents could continue to access our service in the only way they would find manageable. And next slide, thanks Tom. So figures are all well and good, but nothing really shows the difference we can make better than a real client story can. So let me tell you about a recent client's journey. We were approached recently for help by a 55-year-old woman who'd just lost her husband. She was tearful and incredibly anxious and was struggling to deal with such a huge loss. This poor woman had been with her husband at the time of his sudden death, which had happened in their home, and the experience had left her traumatized. On top of this poor lady had no food, no money, no gas and electric, and she could not top up her meters, and she had no bank account. Her husband had always dealt with the finances, as she could not read and write. She was aware she had to pay rent and bills and knew of a joint debt, but was unaware of any details of these. Someone had advised and assisted her with claiming bereavement allowance, and as she had no bank account, a friend had offered her the use of their bank account for receiving the bereavement allowance payments. This offer was gratefully accepted by this poor desperate lady. However, the allowance went into this account and then this friend was suddenly uncontactable. This lady was living in a private rented flat, but was desperate to move due to the trauma experienced there. Unfortunately, she had unknowingly signed a 6-month tenancy agreement, and upon investigation, we found she was 5 months in arrears with her rent. We supported her in understanding her rights as a private tenant. So initially, we provided her with food bank vouchers and assisted her with getting top-up cards for her meters, and we then provided the client with fuel vouchers for her initial top-ups. We assisted her with a universal credit claim online, which would provide an income and pay her rent liability. We arranged for her rent to be paid directly to her landlord, who thankfully was really supportive and understanding. The client was supported with making a personal independence payment claim and freezing her bereavement allowance payments so her friend would have no further access to her money. And we applied for a council tax reduction on her behalf. Support was provided to her to make multiple visits to bank branches in Portsmouth, and she now has a basic bank account in her name for the first time in her life. And of course, we ensured she understood how to operate it. We then arranged for all benefit payments to go directly into her new accounts. We successfully applied for white goods using Portsmouth City Council's scheme, and the client received a new washing machine and fridge freezer. We referred her to our Home and Well service, who ensured she was registered on the relevant priority registers for her fuel and water. This would mean she would be treated as a priority if something was to go wrong again in the future with her gas, electric and water supply. We were able to do this as the lady was classed as vulnerable. We also referred her to our money advice service for future support with paying off a loan and negotiating rent arrears payments. And we supported her to get on the waiting list for a long-term council tenancy. With her agreement, we also made a couple of referrals to other agencies, the Learning Place for one-to-one support with reading and writing, and Positive Minds for help with bereavement and overall emotional well-being. Now, the total financial benefit for this client was a one-off financial benefit with the white goods and the fuel vouchers of around £750, but more importantly, an ongoing financial benefit of approximately £1,800 per month, which comprised of her universal credit, bereavement allowance, rent payments and council tax relief. This lady is still receiving our ongoing support, and the latest update is that she has now moved home. I think that really just tells you volumes about the importance of the work that we do. Okay, I'm going to pass back to Tom. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Sandy. That client story just really brings it home, doesn't it, how important citizens' advice is to the city. Going to move swiftly on now as we have a series of lightning talks. So these will be, I'm hoping, about 5 minutes for each speaker. So I'm going to get us straight into it so we don't miss any of the content. I'm going to hand straight over to Rob Thompson. So Rob.
Brilliant, thank you. So I'm going to cover our key statistics. What I'm going to do, whereas the statistics that you've just seen covered the last financial year, I want to make it a little bit more recent. So I'm going to cover what we have achieved from January last year up until December. So you can get some really recent and good figures. Just before I go through these, I want to point out, because I think it's quite important, I'm going to keep these at a high level because all the speakers that are going to come across the rest of the morning are going to go into much more detail, and you've got brilliant stories like the one from Sandy. And I want to make it clear that all of this was achieved by a mix of staff and volunteers, because I really want to emphasize the importance of our volunteers. I work with them quite a lot and they're absolutely brilliant, as are our staff. And also, as Sandy pointed out, a lot of this work was done directly with clients, so both remotely and face-to-face throughout the heights of the pandemic, which I'm really, really proud of, because that's a very stressful thing to do for a lot of advisors. And finally, I just want to point out, before we get into things as well, that at least 4 of our advisors do all of this with English as a second language. So I can just about advise in English, but imagine having to do that in a second language. That's an absolutely amazing achievement. So can I have the next slide, please, Tom? Thank you. So I'm going to try and keep really still because my chair is really creaky. But this is last year at a glance, and I think these are absolutely brilliant statistics. So we interacted with over 9,451 individual clients. So that might mean we might have spoken to them once or 3 times or 10 times. And this was over 10,900 cases. So that's almost 11,000 entirely separate issues. And that's for clients in Portsmouth and some of our more national services, such as Help to Claim across England and Wales. So it's absolutely brilliant. And this includes as well 18,000 telephone calls just to clients. That doesn't include any calls to creditors, to universal credit or anything like that. And I think that's an absolutely staggering figure when you consider it. And I really want to point this one out because I think it's really good. You can see that although it looks really low, 4% of our clients came to us face to face. That is still hundreds of people throughout the pandemic, because as Sandy said, we kept our service available as much as we could with a drop-in service, with appointments throughout the pandemic. And for that many people to still be able to have access to us face to face is absolutely brilliant. Next slide, please, Tom. So I want to quickly cover some of our top issues. These are pretty much the same issues we always see. There's not been a real big change in terms of what forms our top 5 issues. So the big one for us has always been debt and finances because of our amazing money advice team. We get clients not only in Portsmouth, but from around. But I'm not going to go into that in any more detail because you've got that to come later. Welfare benefits. The main issues that we're seeing are the same ones we've seen previously, but compounded by issues such as the furlough scheme, lack of income and more emergent issues. So it's claims for universal credit. And you may have seen him pop up earlier, and our brilliant welfare benefit specialist, Steve Newton, who helps people with welfare benefit disputes, including up to representation at tribunal, which isn't something a lot of people can always access. Looking at housing, primarily we have the issues that if you're on our generalist service, you will know straight off. They are repairs in your private rented sector. They are your Section 21 notices, your no-fault evictions. And then you also have your disputes with landlords, other tenants and neighbours, which we find a big one. And just because I'm running over a little bit, I'll miss out family, but just to look at charitable support, just as an example of how the pandemic has changed things. For Trussell Trust alone, which is just one of the food banks, we went from 400 Trussell Trust food bank vouchers being issued in 2020 to 480 in 2021, which is a massive increase. And adding on all the other food banks we've built relationships with and made referrals with on top, that is a really, really big increase in charitable support, not even including things like applications for the Household Support Fund. So hate crime and discrimination is something I want to cover. I'm going to cover this very quickly because I thought I'd take about 3 minutes, but clearly not. The reason I want to cover this is because, firstly, we're a hate crime reporting centre. So for those of you that don't know, it means if anyone believes they're a victim of a hate crime and they don't want to approach the police, they can come to us and we will help them do that. We can help them report that. And additionally, the National Citizens Advice Equality and Diversity Plan means that we want to address discrimination and hate crime through good advice. So we're always looking out for it. And these are some worrying looking statistics in line with what Karen was saying at the start. A big increase in hate crime, gender violence and discrimination. A lot of that is down to the trends, but also due to the massive amount of work that our staff and volunteers have undertaken in making sure we identify and address this properly. And so very quickly, my final slide just before we move on is just looking at who our clients are. And you can see here that we get clients from all walks of life, essentially. We've got every age group. We've got clients who have health conditions, but those with long-term health and disabilities. And it's clear that a lot of these are because of the issues that arise. So those with health conditions or disabilities are more likely to require assistance because of navigating the welfare benefits system. Those who are working age are likely to be the ones with employment issues or, for example, working age benefits, which tend to be much more difficult to navigate because they're so complex. And we can see where we need to go forward. We need to carry on engaging even more with those who are over state pension age. So thank you very much for taking the time to listen to all of that. If you've got any questions, please pop them in the chat and we will deal with them later. And I'm going to hand over now to my brilliant colleague, Sharon. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. So my name's Sharon and I've been with Portsmouth Citizens Advice since 2009, working on their Macmillan project. Next slide, please, Tom. So what do? We are a Hampshire-wide service covering Hampshire, the Isle of Wight, Portsmouth and Southampton, and we provide dedicated advice to people affected by cancer who live or are treated in Hampshire. So we do this we have a direct referral system, and we also have an advice line that runs 9 to 4, Monday to Friday, where clients can access our service to receive advice over the telephone or to book an appointment at one of our outreach centres or be referred to their local caseworker who can book an appointment either in their office or we can arrange home visits. Next slide, please, Tom. So last year, the Portsmouth caseworkers, there's 2 of us, there's now me and my colleague Jen. We helped 900 clients last year and we achieved 2.4 million better off income for those clients. And that's through a mixture of disability benefits and grants and blue badges. Next slide, please. As people have been saying, Portsmouth were one of the quickest to return us to face-to-face advice, and this was done by making sure our offices were COVID secure and we quickly welcomed back clients into the office. This allowed us to meet people face-to-face, and also they allowed us, after doing risk assessments, to go out and see people in the community. Firstly, we were doing this in people's gardens, which was good in the summer, but not so good in the winter. But then once vaccinations were on offered to us quite quickly, because we were a frontline service, we managed to see people in their own homes. And this case study just shows a little bit about the benefits of seeing people in their own home rather than just talking to them on the phone, because you get an idea of their whole family circumstances. And we went out and saw somebody who we thought we were just going to do a blue badge for, but we quickly realised that their partner would also qualify for a disability benefit. So we saw both of them, completed both benefits and made the household much better off. We now on all our emails ask people to give us feedback on our service, and most people are saying that we're a great service and that we do help them at a time of great need. The best part of working for Hampshire Macmillan and Portsmouth Citizens Advice is I become a member of 2 teams, so I get support for seeing clients, referring internally to the Money Advice Service. We've made referrals to the immigration team, and we work quite closely with Home and Well. And last slide, I think, or is that my last slide? And I'm now going to thank you for listening. I'm now going to pass you over to Phil and who's our immigration lead.
Thank you, Sharon. Good morning, ladies and gents. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Phil Marshall. I joined CAP in March last year as the Immigration Project Manager after a career in the corporate sector. It's been a challenging first 10 months, but anyone who knows me well knows I enjoy a good challenge. So Tom, next slide, please. Thank you. The refugee or asylum seeker journey is well documented. We've all seen the pictures across news outlets of individuals reaching our shores. The vast majority of those who settle in our community have fled violence and persecution and have suffered perhaps the most terrifying and psychologically damaging experience of their lives just to be here. It's acknowledged that first-generation migrants are at a higher risk of mental ill health and PTSD problems. And when faced with headlines such as those you see on the slide there, it's no surprise that the migrant population in our community can feel isolated, alone, and withdraw themselves to such an extent that they do not know where to turn to for much needed assistance and support. As we move to the next slide, what is CAP doing to support these individuals? Well, as a team, we understand for a lot of our clients, given the isolation and wellbeing issues that I've previously mentioned there, the prospect of coming into our office can be very daunting. So we took the bold decision a couple of months ago to take our immigration team out on the road. And we now offer our specialist services at a number of refugee outreach hubs across the city. In these more informal, safe and comfortable environments, we found that our clients' level of trust in us increases. So they tend to open up a lot more about other issues that they're facing, whether it be problems with their mental health, debt or housing issues. What we try to be always is to be as receptive as possible to our clients' needs, bringing in where we can other advisors from across the portfolio of services you're hearing about today in an attempt to give our clients an all-encompassing wraparound support service. So in essence, for a lot of our clients, their immigration issue is just the starting point of their journey with us at CAP. As we move to my final slide, what difference is this new approach making? Well, I hope you can see by the colourful graphics here that we are making a real impact. The graphic on the right shows that in 2021, we doubled the number of new clients we supported compared to 2020. But for me, it's the middle graphic that's the most telling, with around a third of all our new clients in the last 4 months coming directly from our community outreach programme. These figures show that our clients trust in our ability to provide the positive support and understanding that they need, and we will continue to do what we can for them in 2022 and beyond. Thank you for listening. I'll now hand you over to Sarah Atkinson, our Home and Well advisor.
Hello and good morning, everybody. Next slide, please. Thank you. My name is Sarah Atkinson and I'm the Home and Well advisor here at Citizens Advice Portsmouth. There's a lot of information already on the slide, but essentially I started as a volunteer just 1 day a week and over time joined the administration and triage teams as well as the communications team as a regular contributor to social media and our community news articles. My spare time activities are there. I'm not going to go into those. Next slide, please. Thank you. So that's me, but what is Home and Well? Home and Well started early in 2020 and it is funded by the energy and utility companies, but it is a collaborative project. And this is between Citizens Advice Hampshire, the NHS Clinical Commissioning Group, Southern and Portsmouth Water, SSEN, which is your Scottish and Southern Electricity Network, and the Southern Gas Network. Excuse me. The project name, Home and Well, is really a clear indicator of what this is really about. And the focus is about keeping people well and ideally thriving in their home environments, and with a particular emphasis on fuel poverty. The project supports vulnerable adults in our community, and there are many reasons and things that might cause us to believe a client is vulnerable. And especially with this project, we look at clients who are at risk of hospitalisation or readmittance, or if they are about to be discharged, or if they have recently been discharged. This makes it critical for them. Other reasons may be that they lack essential life skills, need additional support, or have recently suffered a traumatic experience or a loss. Excuse me. I think why it's important to focus on vulnerable people is because they are at a higher risk of harm. They potentially have less financial security and often need advocacy and additional support quite broadly. Next slide, please. Thank you. So how do we help our Home and Well clients? I'm going to put, the slide is all about fuel poverty, and I'm going to talk alongside that. There's a lot of information you don't need to know at all. Essentially, when a client is referred to us, or if we identify them as vulnerable ourselves, or a social prescriber may refer as well, we carry out the fullest possible exploration of the client's full circumstances. We identify elements of fuel poverty and assist as a priority for this project, but we also identify any other impacting issues and provide very much a holistic approach and wraparound support. I think you've heard that term before with Phil. We give a general advice service and a specialist advice service where it's needed. This can be help with housing, immigration, benefits, debt and money advice, families and relationships, and beyond. It goes on and on. We also refer and signpost our clients to ensure they are given access to additional specialist services and anything else they need. The positive impacts of Home and Well. We're able to reduce a client's anxieties and concerns. We enable people to be able to focus more on their recovery and less on the worries of their environment around them. We help ensure that their home is efficient, comfortable, safe, and more stable. We achieve this by finding ways to maximise their income and save money. That's through discounts, benefits checks, making sure they're getting everything they're entitled to, and additional support where it's available, including grants. We work to improve home efficiency and the living conditions, and if that means a referral to external services like Switched On Portsmouth, or help with warming their home, there's many things that we can do to assist. And we assure that all the appropriately identified support is in place to improve our clients' ability to cope and to help them feel better. Next slide, please. With more people living with fuel poverty and in increased hardship, from all the things that we've already covered this morning, the Home and Well project plays a vital role in supporting well-being. This is by identifying and addressing the critical issues that serve to further threaten the most vulnerable people's physiological needs, and ensuring that better support is in place for them for the future. I'd now like to give you just a few moments to consider the slide in front of you. I appreciate there's an awful lot to take in. This case study reflects the often complex issues that a vulnerable client may come to us with. And in turn, it shows the broad range of support and advice that's necessary to make a positive and hopefully a lasting difference, which can ultimately enable a client to feel well and remain well. Thank you very much for listening to my lightning talk. I'm now going to hand you over to my colleague Selina from our Positive Minds team.
Hiya, I'm Selina. I came to Systems Advice Portsmouth in 2019 and worked out on reception, did some administration, and then started working speaking to clients that were phoning in on the information points. I then went on maternity leave and came back as a Positive Minds advisor in April. I love my role at Citizens Advice, and I'm going to tell you a bit about the Positive Minds project. There's a bit of information about me. Could I have the next slide, please? So Positive Minds, it's a new style service to help people who feel the need to have help with their emotional and mental health. They offer support for citizens in Portsmouth, PO1 to PO6, and they can refer to people such as Talking Change. Next slide, please. So as a Positive Minds advisor, I'm funded to help referred clients for things like housing. So I can help with housing options, referring for homelessness, repairs, problems with the landlords. I can help relationships. It covers domestic violence, relationship breakdowns, children. Can refer into our money advice project. Can talk about benefits and tax credits with clients, financial capability as well to make sure that they have the right benefits that they need. And we can, I also talk to clients that walk in if they're vulnerable and need support. Next slide, please. So one of the clients that we've recently seen, he came in because he didn't feel safe. He was a member of the community and had been referred to mental health services previously, but had been discharged. We assisted the client with a referral to the community mental health team. They were actually really good. They agreed to see the client the day that we called them and sent a taxi to collect the client. The client then returned to us at future dates, and we helped them with money advice and with grants for white goods, and did a welfare benefit check. But the client was really pleased and happy and doing well. But yeah, so that's a bit about me. I'm just going to pass over to my colleague Donna.
Thanks, Selina. Good morning, everybody. Sorry about the camera here. It's not very bright. There we go. That's better. So good morning. Yes, my name's Donna. I'm a part-time generalist advisor for the Forces Families Project. I've been working at the Citizens Advice Portsmouth since 2008 and the Forces Families Project since 1st of August 2021. I work as a generalist advisor, helping clients with their debt and financial management issues. As you can see, I have some interests, one of them being football. The claim to fame was England. 2018, whilst others were working, I was in the front page of the Evening News. Next slide, please. Forces Families Project. Who are we and what do we do? We're an Armed Forces Covenant-funded project that's been working since October 2018. It is delivered in partnership by Citizens Advice Heart, Rushmore Citizens Advice and Portsmouth Citizens Advice. We aim to help serving personnel and their families. We do this by partnering with the welfare teams and other partners to provide independent, confidential advice and support to serving personnel and their families across Hampshire. We are facing low health and wellbeing as they deal with the life-changing events. The main topics and issues that we cover are housing, relationships, debt, benefit and tax credits, and financial capability. Next slide, please. Case study. It was Christmas and our client was referred to us for urgent support with food voucher and fuel voucher. After talking to the client, we discovered they didn't have the means to heat their food or water. The client had recently transitioned from being street homeless into social housing. As you're aware, there's a lot of that going on. A food fuel voucher was issued to the client and a request was made to the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Community Fund to purchase a microwave and kettle for the client. These items arrived at the client's flat in time for Christmas. Our client was overwhelmed by the speed of our assessment of their situation and the actions taken to support their needs. Additionally, the client was set up with appointments for longer term support whilst the universal credit claim is also being supported. Thank you. Next slide. Over to my colleague, Jan Thomas. Thank you.
Jan, you're on mute.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Jan Thomas, and I'm the Business Development Manager for Citizens Advice Portsmouth. And my role involves generating income so that we can be securely funded and finding ways that we can improve the service for our clients and our customers. I've had a sort of a corporate background, thought I was going to retire, volunteered for a while. Sandy interviewed me, and as the rest of us say is history, and I've got sucked into Citizens Advice now. I absolutely love it. I'm finding that I'm able to use all my skills and abilities, so it's been a great path for me. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to tell you about a project that we undertook to do with the relationship between debt and mental health, and Dr. Tom Richardson later in this meeting is going to talk about this in some detail. But last year we became aware anecdotally about the link between people that were phoning up with debt problems and also disclosing to us that they had mental health issues. We were becoming more and more concerned about this, so we decided to try and gather some empirical data and managed to get some funding from the National Lottery to undertake this mental health Ask project. And the reason it's called Ask is because when a client approaches us for debt advice, we actually ask them how their debt is affecting their mental well-being. And this today is all about well-being, so this is a very relevant topic to include. So the project ran between December and April last year. It wasn't just people phoning up about debt, there were high levels of unemployment as well that were linked to high suicide rates. We were very lucky in that we had bespoke expert training developed by mental health professionals to identify that the client was in emotional distress, and also to give our advisors the confidence to undertake this discussion. You can understand how some advisors might balk at asking people about, could you potentially, risk harming yourself? But the training that we gave them made them much more robust and confident in asking those questions. So in the pilot trial, the questions were asked at the start of the advice session, and then after a 3 or 4 week period, we followed up and seen the outcome and measured the outcome of those. Because what happened was that if they disclosed that they did have poor mental health, we would then signpost them to a mental health professional for help. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we were lucky enough to get our evaluation done by Dr. Jessica Banks, a young registrar who was actually looking for an evaluation project, so that was incredibly lucky. That was just a bit of good synergy. But the results of the survey that we undertook and the study that we undertook identified that there is in fact a high unmet need for mental health support amongst this client group. The clients found the ask acceptable, and they did act upon the advice given on the whole. So the study concluded that there's an opportunity to help individuals to access appropriate and timely mental health services, and most importantly, without the use of a general practitioner. So if we were to expand this approach and roll it out to other organisations, we think there's a huge benefit of saving GP resources. Next slide, please. So we only had a small study in phase 1, so we got some more money this year from the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Sustainability and Transformation Partnership Prevention Programme. That's quite a long title, but basically it was a fund that was looking for ways to prevent suicide. So we thought that this actually matched quite well under the criteria. So the communities that we're trying to reach within this project are those that have mental health issues but who already come to us for support, with debt, but this time we're actually including all clients that approach us. Clients who may be struggling with a psychological health that's exacerbated by debt, and we will ask them to self-refer. We will signpost them to an agreed process for mental health support to catch people early before there is a crisis. Next slide, please. So our aim is to get a much wider reach of respondents to the survey. Last time we only had a 3-month survey. This time it's a year-long project with a 6-month operational period. The design and evaluation, I'm delighted to say, will be carried out by Dr. Thomas Richardson, who you'll hear from later, in conjunction with ourselves. And the aim is to provide enough data to persuade citizens advice national organisations that this is an important and acceptable way of probing for mental health from debt clients, and to make sure that they get the help that they need. I think that's me. The next slide, please. Yes, hand over to Denise McGarry now. Thank you very much.
Morning, everybody. Next slide, please, Tom. My name's Denise. I've been working with Citizens Advice Portsmouth since September 2008, and during this time I've had the pleasure to work on a number of different CA projects and with some lovely people. The Royal British Legion was one, Positive Minds and Joining Forces for Families, and of course the Money Advice Pension Service before becoming the Money Advice Manager in March 2021.
Hello everyone, I'm Ian. I've been working with Citizens Advice since August 2012, having previously worked for the commercial and retail banking sector with Lloyds for close to 30 years. Started out as an administrator with the Debt Advice Project back in 2012, then became a fully qualified money advisor. And since the end of September 2020, I've been the Quality and Compliance Officer, focusing the support for the money advice team run by MAPS.
Thank you. Next slide, Tom, please. So who are we? The Money and Pension Service is sponsored directly by the DWP, established at the beginning of 2019, which is combining the Money Advice Service, pension-wise, and the Pension Advisory Service, and is the largest funder of the debt advice in England. And what do we do? The MAPS Money Advice team at Citizens Advice Portsmouth is made up of qualified or accredited money advisors. We help people, particularly those who are in need, to improve their financial well-being and build a better, more confident future by providing a specialist debt advice service to individuals how and when they need it. Thank you. Next slide.
Okay, everyone. We basically operate under two contracts. One's the mainstream contract, which encompasses face-to-face, telephone, email, and other digital forums that come our way. We also operate under a national web chat contract where our advisors operate on a daily basis, supporting the national web chat service. In terms of clients, as you can see there on the mainstream, from April to December, we amassed 1,422 clients, and that was against a target of 1,436. So we were virtually 100%, we're 99%, and at the moment we're in the top 7 of 17 in the southeast. In terms of the web chat contract, you can see there that we are 100%. We've hit 1,978 clients against a target of 1,976. So you can see that we are helping a phenomenal amount of clients across both platforms and both contracts. In terms of the types of issues that we see, the main focus, you're looking at council tax arrears, including bailiff action for enforcement of that. You said we see quite a lot of unpaid parking penalties, which again can ultimately end up with enforcement action if the client does nothing with them. And other than that, you're looking at the main things like credit store cards, personal loans, other debts and stuff like that. So, you know, it's quite a wide range of debts that we have to cover off, but those are the main focuses. In terms of channels used by clients, with COVID, obviously, and the remote working and the initial closure of the face-to-face, that sort of dropped away quite significantly. But with the telephone system that we had in place, you know, we can see there that we've, you know, sort of over half of our client contacts are via telephone, a quarter are by web chat, and the other 19% or so add up to email and all the other contracts. So you can sort of see the wide, you know, areas in which we cover the you know, client needs. Next slide, please, Tom. No one money advice client is the same as another, but there may obviously be similarities. This is a flavour of the type of work our advisors support clients with. And as you can see there, this case study shows that a client phoned into the service and presented with several non-priority debts with the threat of court action present. Client lost their job due to COVID-19 and is only receiving welfare state benefits at this particular time. Client's debtness was about 15,000 across 2 credit regulated debts and 1 non-regulated debt. And one of those creditors was looking to escalate the recovery of the debt through the civil money claim process in the county court, which would ultimately lead to a county court judgment, as CCJ, as we all know. The advisor, you know, fully explored the client's situation, carried out a financial assessment, including income maximisation. All the debt options would have been assessed, and obviously consequences of non-payment would have been advised to the client. In this particular case, the client was supported in the completion of a response to the creditor with a court claim and empowered to contact his other declared creditors to make equitable pro rata payments to each one going forward, because it was obviously determined that they had sufficient monies to do so. Overall, the client was impressed with the nature of the advice that we provided and helped him resolve the matter, which had become overwhelming for him. In a similar situation, other options may be recommended, such as forming insolvency options like a debt relief order, but our skilled, you know, and fully trained money advisors are there to explore the client's situation, you know, understand all their circumstances and look to find out what support is necessary, and eventually determine what the client's best options are for dealing with their debts going forward. That's basically in a nutshell. So thank you very much for listening. I'll hand you back to Tom.
Hello. Okay, well, firstly, thank you to all our presenters there from our amazing team. I think that gave a real insight to the variety of things that they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So thank you for that. We've actually are ahead of schedule, so it's probably a good time now just to pause and have a look and see if there's any questions, or if anyone wants to ask any questions on anything they've seen so far. I'm having a look at the chat. I think we're all right, but if anyone does have anything, it would be a good time to raise it if there was anything. Just give people a minute to see if they're typing. Okay. So I think, although we're about 5 minutes early, I think what we can do now is we can actually go for a break. If people are right to come back at 11, we should have the first of our guest speakers, which will be Dr. Thomas Richardson, giving us a view of the impact of money and mental health. So I'll leave you all now to go have a break, and we'll see you back here at 11. Thank you. Hello, good morning all and welcome back. We'll just give people an extra minute just in case we've got any stragglers before we launch back into it. Okay, hopefully that's given people enough time. So we are very happy to have Dr. Thomas Richardson with us, who's going to give us a presentation on the psychology of the relationship between money and mental health problems. So I'm hoping Dr. Thomas is on the call.
Yes, I am.
Perfect, thank you and welcome. We're operating a little bit of a next slide please situation, if that's okay with you. So I'll just move briefly on if you're ready to start.
Yeah, it does allow me to share content, which would make it easier. Would that be okay?
If you can, if it's working, that's fine.
Well,
Give it a
I'm
go.
going to be saying that a lot because there's some slides where I have to click multiple times, so I don't want
to. Give it a go, and if it works,
yeah, let's see.
All up to you. Is that you or me?
Not me. That's you, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, can you see that?
We can. I'll drop off then and let you drive.
Brilliant. And I've got until half past, right?
You have.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
I'll leave some time at the end for questions and everything then. Discussion. So yes, as that slide kind of introduced me, I used to work at St Mary's in Portsmouth in the mental health team for Solent NHS Trust. I've now joined the University of Southampton as a researcher and a teacher, so associate professor there. So one of the things I was doing as part of the Portsmouth Mental Health Alliance was working with Sandy and others around trying to join up thinking around sort of debt and poverty and financial difficulties and mental health problems. And this is something I'm working actually with Sandy and Jan on a bit of a project now for Portsmouth as well. So this is something I've been interested in for a few years, and I'm going to really tell you about the impact, the relationship between money and mental health problems, which I'm sure you would all come to see on a day-to-day basis, but I'm going to give you a bit of an overview of some of the research. And I'm going to tell you in particular about my interest as a psychologist about why there is this relationship, not just there is a relationship, but why and the psychology behind it. So people of low socioeconomic status, people in poverty, overall, and this research from a lot of different countries, have risk of a range of different mental health problems. They're more at risk. In the UK specifically, areas which have higher pockets of deprivation have higher levels of people of deliberate self-harm and psychiatric hospital admissions. Those who are from kind of the lowest socioeconomic position, more deprived backgrounds, poverty, are much more likely to develop psychotic illnesses, such as diagnosis of schizophrenia. It's a little bit unclear what comes first. There's the chicken and egg question with a lot of research in psychology, but around this as well. Is it that if you are from a really poor background, a deprived area, you're more likely to develop it? Is it that if you develop something like psychosis and you struggle to hold down a job and you're relying on benefits income, that you have to move to an area, you have to move somewhere which is cheaper, might be a more deprived neighborhood? But I'm going to talk more about this, and there's some evidence that the relationship kind of works both ways. In terms of finances and suicide, recessions overall, I've got the references here just at the end, so if anyone does want to look, recessions there's a lot of evidence from various recessions over the years, different countries, increase the risk of common mental health problems such as depression and anxiety, also increase the prevalence of, this is at a population level, substance use problems and suicidal behaviour such as attempts to end life, self-harm. There was an analysis in Greece which showed an increase in suicide rates during a period of a recession and austerity from kind of 2009 onwards, when there was the kind of debt crisis in the euro, etc. This was only for particular age groups. It was men of particular age groups. Yeah, but there was a definite increase. Unemployment is a risk factor for suicide. A study of 10 countries in Europe found that socioeconomic deprivation was linked to higher suicide rates. And a recent study, which was impressive study with worrying results, that the entire population of Sweden, this looked at the entire population of Sweden, and shows that those who are in debt were 2.5 times more likely to end their lives by suicide over the course of a year. Now that's after you take account other financial variables, age, gender, etc. That's after you control for all of that. There's still something about debt 2.5 times. Now that's what we call the kind of the relative risk. The absolute risk is still very low, so it's 2.5 times more likely, but we're talking about, you know, well under 1%, 0.0 something percent. Okay, so the amount of people who do it is still low, but I was crunching the numbers the other day, and based on my calculations, if this estimate from Sweden holds, we've probably got about 1,800 people a year in the UK in debt who end their lives by suicide every year. So I don't want you to panic in terms of, you know, the number of people in debt who do actually end their lives by suicide is still very small, and it is still significantly higher than people who aren't in debt. Poverty and deprivation. So thinking about depression specifically, this is increased by unemployment, jobs insecurity, bankruptcy, not surprisingly, levels of income, but also financial strain. So whether people can feel like they can get by, whether they can make ends meet and pay the bills. Having to borrow money from informal sources, so borrowing money from friends, etc., and also having a utility disconnected are related to an increase of mental health problems. So those specifically having a utility disconnected, and I think that's very pertinent with all of the news about the increase in, well, generally about the increase in living costs, but in particular, some estimates, I think it's going to nearly double energy costs this year. So thinking about fuel poverty, I'm particularly worried about people in fuel poverty and their mental health in the coming months. Short-term loans, aka payday aid loans, are also linked to higher levels of anxiety. In terms of the financial impact of COVID, there's not a whole lot actually been done so far. There's maybe a handful of studies. I've got a couple of data sets which I'm going to look at on this. One study of 49,000 adults over the first year of COVID showed that financial worries increased the risk of suicidal thoughts and behaviours such as self-harm. Another study in the USA showed that COVID-related stress, such as not being able to pay the bills, being furloughed, also increased the risk of suicidal ideation. This is people, the general population, so this isn't just people with mental health problems, this is the general population. Another thing to bear in mind is socioeconomic inequality. So a study of 65 countries by the World Health Organization found that rates of depression really varied in countries between levels of income inequality, i.e. the difference between rich and poor. This next graph is, there's something called the Equality Trust. This is from a book which I'm currently reading, and it is pretty mind-blowing, called The Spirit Level, which is by two health economists from the UK, and they use publicly available data to show countries across the world, but also they look at the USA, they look at individual states in the USA to show at a certain point how well, you know, once a country is kind of developed and fairly wealthy, getting more, being richer doesn't actually help a population's health, including mental health. And actually, the more unequal society is, the more there are a whole range of problems. So this is the proportion of people with any mental health problem, and you can see a very strong correlation there. There are some outliers, such as Italy, but if you see there, the UK unfortunately is pretty high on the top, along with the USA, on both mental health problems and how unequal incomes are if you compare kind of the bottom 20% of earners to the top 20% of earners. So what about debt specifically, which I know in your work, Citizens Advice, is something you're going to be coming across, delivering debt advice a lot. And I know from Sandy, you get hundreds of people a year just for that. So I did a meta-analysis a few years ago. So that is where you basically pull together all the numbers from all the research so far. So I pulled together lots of data from various studies. Overall, people in debt are more than 3 times as likely to have a mental health disorder, a mental health problem. So looking at this is from various studies from various countries, overall on average, about 9% of people with no mental health problem are in debt, compared to 25% of those who are in debt. Or if you look at it the other way, again, we've got the chicken and egg question. 42% of those in debt have a mental health problem, compared to 18% of those not in debt. That's a big proportion there. So, you're just worth considering that the people who are presenting for debt advice are much more likely to be struggling for mental health than the general population of Portsmouth, or maybe even people who are presenting for other non-debt related issues. There's a particular relationship for depression, for suicide attempts and completion as well, for problems with drink and drugs, and for psychotic illnesses as well. So it's overall there's a problem, but for particular mental health problems as well. Now, one of the things I did, which was my doctorate thesis and kickstarted this research of mine, was around when the tuition fees went up in 2011, 2012. If you remember, they kind of, from one year to the next, it went from $3,500 to up to $9,000. And the amount of debt was predicted to sort of double for students. So I followed up students before and after this fees increase, and I wanted to see about the impact on mental health. So this was 390 people. So this is a measure of kind of overall mental health. I know it's a little bit hard to make sense of the graph, but essentially this is over their 4 time points over their first year, okay? And this here, this line at the top, the solid blue line, is people who are paying the increased fees. And these 2 lines are people who are paying the lower $3,000 to $4,000, all students from Scotland who are paying somewhere between $0 and $3,000. So some of them got for free in Scotland. Now, the only time where there was actually what we'd call a statistically significant difference was here at time 2. So there was one of the 4 time points, people who had more tuition fees were worse mental off, but that kind of disappeared. So it wasn't a particularly big impact. Interestingly, the people who were paying less had more problems with drink. And that may well just be a practical thing, that those who were paying higher tuition fees could not afford to drink as much. So actually the tuition fees amount, how big a student loan, how much debt you were in had very little impact. But struggling to pay the bills increased symptoms over time. So this is, your symptoms getting worse over time. So it shows that you look at how much people are struggling financially, and then how does that predict how their mental health up to a year later, but you control for initially how bad they are. So this chicken and egg thing. So it's not just the people are depressed or worse with their finances. You're actually looking at, does it make your mental health get worse over time? So depression, anxiety, stress, problem drinking, psychotic symptoms such as unusual sensations, hearing voices, paranoia, and also eating disorder risk for things like bulimia and anorexia. Those all got worse over time. Worth saying regarding the tuition fees, this was only in the first year of their studies, and I have a hunch that you probably won't see the differences between the cohorts for a long time, because people in first year, they're getting into their studies, they're probably having fun, hopefully having fun, and maybe their student loan doesn't impact them. Maybe when they've been graduated 5 years and they're thinking about buying a house, getting married, etc., then there's a difference. So the gap will get bigger over time. You know, maybe worrying about your student loan isn't that big when you're 21, but when you're 30 and you're still 40 grand in debt. So it may well be that this had a bigger impact, and some economists predict that with the 9 grand increase, the majority of students will never pay off their debt. So I think there may well be a difference emerging now, but I couldn't follow people up that long in that study, unfortunately. But there was also this vicious cycle. Something in my clinical practice I will often see. We often get a vicious cycle between situations such as this. So poor mental health, eating disorder risk led to greater financial difficulties over time, and vice versa. It worked both ways. And I'm sure you can imagine with some of your clients how this is often the case. People get stressed out and depressed about their level of debt. They then bury their head in the sand and avoid opening bills and don't want to get any debt advice, and then it gets worse. One thing I've moved on to look at specifically is about bipolar disorder, because anecdotally, you know, it's in the diagnostic criteria. This is people who have depression, but they also have episodes of mania, hypomania, where they might be very elated, lots of energy, lots of big ideas, very impulsive. And it's in the diagnostic criteria that often people with bipolar disorder will impulsively spend when they're manic. So I did a little bit of a study, this was in Portsmouth, looking at this. So first of all, I interviewed people, and I gave people, you know, writing down qualitative, what we call, they wrote down how their money impacted their mental health and vice versa. So there's a theme here about overspending and impulse shopping when they're manic, which what didn't come as a surprise. What did come as a surprise was this idea of excessive generosity, buying friends, family, loved ones loads of presents they can't afford. Some people gave away thousands of money to charity which they couldn't afford. Anxiety, depression, and often suicidality. So someone there, the very reason I tried to commit suicide 3 years ago. And regret, guilt. So regret about overspending. You know, start to realize, what have I done? What made me buy these things? Poor planning and avoiding. So when people are depressed, when people are anxious, they tend to avoid. So burying your head in the sand, ignoring these demands. Also, some people spoke about this idea of a vicious circle. So I've realized I'm spending and putting my family in financial stress, and this leads to larger depression. Then I comfort spend again to cope. Fortunately, people talking about poor employment. So having a mental health problem meant they couldn't work, or they had to take a lower paid job that was flexible maybe, or part-time work, which obviously had a financial impact. And this comfort spending, trying to make yourself feel better when you're feeling down, also merged. So this is a bit of a timeline of how I think it might relate to these mood changes. So this is the cycle of bipolar disorder and mania and depression. So I think people might overspend when they're manic. They become very avoidant when they sort of start to realize when their mood crashes. They feel guilty, they regret it, they feel down, they feel anxious. They maybe bury their head in the sand. One person said, I let my bills pile up to a certain level and then I chuck them in the bin. Some people even feel suicidal. And then maybe there's a vicious cycle where you go back to square one, unfortunately, where people comfort spend to try and make themselves feel better. So I also did some research where I followed up people over time. So I followed people with bipolar disorder up a few months apart. I gave them questionnaires about their mental health, about their finances, and about other psychological factors. And putting that together with these interviews, this is the model I've developed for bipolar disorder. It can get a bit complicated, bear with me. I'm not saying this occurs for everyone with bipolar disorder. I'm saying this is all of the potential mechanisms. You have financial difficulties, but then what is important is perceived financial wellness. So how much you are worrying about your financial situation. This fuels anxiety, and then people might avoid finances because they make them feel anxious. So you're back to square one. People with bipolar disorder tend to have quite high standards, quite perfectionist, very focused on achievement, etc. And we actually found that financial difficulties predicted later impulsive spending, which on the face of it doesn't sound like it makes a whole lot of sense. But actually, what we think is people are broke. They get these big ideas. I need to achieve. I need to get myself out of this. They maybe make a plan to make money, a business idea, get rich quick scheme. Their mood increases. They maybe take a few more risks and are more impulsive. So they spend money to make money. And maybe it's a very grandiose business idea. And they come back to square one. What we also found, and this is in line with those findings about having to go, having a utility disconnected, having to go without buying new clothes, not having enough electricity, that was an important predictor of depression. We think what happens is it really lowers people's self-esteem. They feel really rubbish about themselves. They might feel depressed or suicidal. And then there's two ways this might also relate to impulse spending. First of all, we showed that mindfulness, which you may well have heard of, mindfulness predicted impulsive spending 4 months later. People who were less aware of what was going on, more mindless, were more likely to impulse spend. So I think if you're depressed and your mind's elsewhere, you might be more vulnerable to this. But also there's this thing of comfort spending, where people spend money to try and make themselves feel better, but they reported it works for a little bit and then it ends up digging them deeper into a debt hole. The last one was around other people. So people spend and then they regret what happened. Oh, I'm not going to have enough family. My family's going to be angry with me. They then get these thoughts around dependence. They worry, are people going to really hate me for this? My family going to be really angry with me? And then they're overly generous. So one person's comments were about, I get worried I've spent loads of money, so I buy my family presents to make up for it. So a bit more about the psychological mechanisms. So why is it that finances lead to mental health? This is why I'm interested in particular as a psychologist. So first of all, there's some pretty good evidence that actually how stressed people feel about their debt is more important than the actual amount of debt in terms of the impact on depression. So this is an important thing to ask maybe people you're helping, is how worried they are about it. And I'm sure you may probably experience this. £200 over into your overdraft is a massive deal to some people, whereas £2,000 into your overdraft is not a big deal for other people. And of course, there's other impacts on that, like how much your income is, for example. But there's also a psychological element. If you believe your finances are going to get worse, this predicts poor mental health. There's something about worrying that things are going to get worse. There's something about social as well. So there was a study of older adults in China found that their social network and how much they felt they could get help from their kind of community was a buffer. It helped moderate the impact of debt on depression. Another thing that I did a few years ago, we published a review where we went through and looked at all the research that had been done on these psychological mechanisms that link financial difficulties with mental health. And overall, I mean, the subjective, so the stress, the worry about finances is more important than objective measures of finances, like the amount of debt you're in. So how much you worry about it is more important than how much debt you're actually in. So this is kind of the model we developed. So there's objective financial hardship. Can you pay the bills? Are you in debt? Then there's subjective. How much do you worry about it? Do you feel like it's going to get better? Do you feel hopeful? And then what also turned financial hardship into mental health was hopelessness, which linked to poor mental health, stress, and depression, but also shame. This was what we'd call a mediator. They linked these two things. Shame also linked anxiety. So people who are struggling financially become depressed, stressed, because if they're hopeless about it, and then they become anxious if they're really ashamed about their financial situation. So that was a research paper we did of 100 and something people over time. Another thing we did is we did a review of all the research that has been done. So we looked at dozens of papers, and what we found is this link between financial hardship and mental health. There are a few things which were protective. They helped buffer you from the impact of financial problems. So self-esteem, how confident you felt about your own abilities. Personal agency, so whether you felt like you had some control over what was going on. Could you do something about it? And then active coping, trying to do something about it rather than burying your head in the sand, which often people do when they're depressed. So I think a positive thing is, an active coping mechanism which would help buffer there would definitely be coming to you for debt advice, for example. So just actually trying to do something active about it really helps mitigate and reduce the impact of the financial hardship on mental health. So, to summarize, people's level of worry and stress about finances and debt is actually more important on their mental health than the amount of debt. Psychological factors like how hopeful people are, how ashamed they are, they really turn these financial struggles into poor mental health. Sense of agency, whether people feel like they can do something about it, they actively cope, and they have, solid self-esteem about whether they can cope and whether they're a good person. They're all protect, they all help buffer. And mental health increases the risk of financial difficulty. So it does work both ways due to avoiding when you're in problems, maybe goal-focused impulse spending, and problems with employment as well. And I think that the impulse spending, one thing I'll say about that as well is that it's not always random. I think it might appear random for people with bipolar disorder, but often there's a goal behind it. What does this mean for your work? Well, anything you can do to help your clients, which I'm sure you already do, feel more in control of their finances is going to really help. So show them what they can do, small changes they can make. Tell them their options financially, a debt relief order or whatever it is, budgeting. Really try and de-shame and destigmatize, normalize financial problems, normalize the impact they can have on your mental health. Tell them how many people you see, because people will really keep this to themselves, and shame grows in secrecy, in the dark. So really just saying, look, this is how many people we've seen this month in Portsmouth alone. I think that's actually going to be really helpful. And increasing hope. I know people are going to feel very hopeless, and I know sometimes there's really difficult financial situations, but maybe telling them about what the outcome could be, what previous clients have had, tell them some of your success stories. You can't guarantee it, but it gives them that little bit of hope. Even if the worst comes and they have to declare bankruptcy, you can think about, okay, how long does that last for? It's 6 years or something. Then what? If you've got any examples of people who have gone bankrupt and actually rebuilt a life, tell them about this, because when you're depressed, when you're anxious, you catastrophize about the worst case scenario. So anything to make them feel a little bit more hopeful is going to be really helpful. Okay. These are references to my research that I've published that I just talked about there. And then I've got the references to the other, these are mine as well. And then I've got references to just some of the other papers I talked about, in the unlikely event that anyone wants to read a little bit more. All right, 29 minutes past. Do we have time for a few questions?
Yeah, we will make time for a few questions if you're happy, if we've got some.
Yeah.
Great. So firstly, thanks. That was very interesting. I've taken some notes myself just about, shame grows in secrecy, all this stuff. It's so dark when you're in it, isn't it? It's hard to see that there's a way out of that. So should we give people 30 seconds more in case anyone's got a question they want to type in the box so we can see it that way? All right, a lot of thanks. Obviously, we've got a question here. Just going through. Karen Richardson, question for Dr. Richardson. Maybe relation, maybe you've caused, maybe you've keyed it up. Is there a word for someone who overeats and can't stop? From Karen Richardson.
Well, yeah, I think the diagnostic term would probably be binge eating. There's also bulimia, which is the binge eating, but also comes with might be bouts of restricting, and it might be purging, making yourself sick, or using laxatives to lose weight. But yeah, I think there's definitely increasing recognition. If any of your clients present with that, there is eating disorder service that does cover Portsmouth. There is, like I said, my research showed that overall risk of eating disorder symptoms in student, at least, is increased by financial difficulties. I think the link there is probably something around control. I can't control my financial situation, but maybe I can control what I'm eating and my weight. But as I remember, someone pointed out to me rightly, for people who have bulimia and might eat huge amounts of food and then make themselves sick, it costs a hell of a lot of money to do that.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, there's so many links to a whole host of things that, the effects, isn't it, that can really have on people. And I see someone's even put a link there to a site around that particular topic that people can dive into a bit more. So I think question-wise, I think we're covered. Thank you very much for your time, Dr. Thomas. We're going to send, I think this pack's recorded, so we'll have all the references and people can review that a little bit at their leisure. But that's fascinating. I've taken, like I say, some notes for myself to look in for. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for having me, and keep up the great work you do. It's really important what you do. It really is. All right. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Right. We shall now see how we go on to getting control back. So give us a second whilst we just sort this one out. Might need some help here. I don't know if we can reshare. So give me a sec, see if I can share the contact again. Little bit of frantic typing there, so I think we're ready to move on. Jane, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm ready. That was
Brilliant,
fascinating.
thanks.
Thank you so much, Tom. I'm sure we all really enjoyed that. So linking now the theme of social value into well-being, how can we measure the impact on well-being and social value? This is a thorny topic for a lot of government and voluntary organisations. Next slide, please. So what is well-being? Karen's given us a very comprehensive overview, and we've talked about that earlier in the meeting, and it is one of the very important components that make up social value. Next slide, please. So social value really is the importance that people place on the changes that they experience in their lives. It's not simply, the economic market value or efficiency or, the pounds that something creates, but rather more it's, increasing our levels of confidence. And as Tom has just told us, resolving our problem debt can increase well-being and therefore increase our social value. These things are important to all of us, but historically we haven't measured them in the same way that we've focused on financial value. But that's changing. More and more organisations and the government are focusing on this, and also a lot of younger employees and organisations are interested in what is my organisation doing more than the bottom line or the balance sheet. They want to make sure that organisations are doing their bit. Next slide, please. So increasingly organisations are looking more holistically, taking into account the wider economic and social environmental effects of their activities. They can add social value by contributing to the long-term well-being and resilience. And the United Nations have taken a lead with their Sustainable Development Goals, which we've actually got as underlining in a fundamental part of our own business planning activity as a social charter for the planet. Next slide, please. So how do we measure well-being and social value? I think, to say the least, it can be complex and very time-consuming, as when I come on to tell you about the guidance. I think it has to be proportionate because, to be honest, you could do nothing else but calculate your social value for organisations. So I think we need to find ways of doing it smartly and getting good at this. Next slide, please. So the first area to talk about is the font of all knowledge, if you like, the HM Treasury Green Book, which is considered the go-to place for best practice in measuring social value. For smaller organisations, you can't measure everything in detail, or you do nothing else. There's a big opportunity cost there. But this book actually gives technical guidance and helps decision makers about how to achieve an explicit policy objective and to maximise their social value. It sets out the approach to weighing up the costs and the benefits. The economic case concerns social welfare values or well-being. It's not limited to purely economic effects and takes into account the social and environmental impacts. Next slide, please. So there's an excellent overview of well-being within the Green Book and theories and the science of the practical advice, but it accepts that well-being is central to social value and it introduces a new unit of social value called well-being. It's a way that you can actually measure the contribution that an organisation makes to society. So they calculate that a 1 unit increase in life satisfaction for 1 year is worth £13,000, which is quite interesting. So it gives us an idea of how we can start to actually put some monetary values on these social values. The idea is to measure people ideally before and after your programme or project using pre-validated questions from national data sets so that you can have a before and after picture of the intervention. Next slide, please. So we look at, for example, the life satisfaction of people that have visited a green space in the last week compared to those who haven't. If we said on average that they report a life satisfaction of 7.4 compared to 7.3 of those who haven't visited a green space, the difference is 0.1 well-being per person. So we multiply that 0.1 by the value of a well-being, £13,000, which gives a value of £1,300 that we can attribute to them having visited a green space. There are other national measures of well-being, and let's talk about the personal well-being measures that the Office for National Statistics produces. These can be benchmarked against national data down to local authority level, and they ask the respondents, overall, how satisfied are you with your life nowadays? To what extent do you feel that the things you do in your life are worthwhile? How happy did you feel yesterday? And how anxious did you feel yesterday? Subjective well-being is referred to as personal well-being. It's about people evaluating their own lives. These 4 questions are known as the ONS4, and they were first added to the Annual Population Survey in April 2011. The Annual Population Survey is the source of national estimates of personal well-being in the UK that are published quarterly by ONS. Next slide, please. So other measures of well-being are the shorter Warwick and Edinburgh mental wellbeing scale, and we actually used this approach in the first phase of our mental health Ask project. So you would ask people when you first encounter them how optimistic they've been feeling about the future, and they have to answer on a scale of 1 to 5 if they've been feeling useful, if they feel relaxed, if they deal with their problems well, if they can think clearly, if they've been feeling close to other people and able to make their mind up about things. And I think the fog and confusion that Tom mentioned in the earlier talk could really be exposed, if you like, by the answers to these questions. And then the idea is that after your intervention, for example, debt advice, you go back to that client and you re-ask those questions and you measure how much their sense of well-being has improved in the interim period. Next slide, please. So there are other measures of well-being. OECD, the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, that allows comparisons across countries based on 11 topics. These are, I know you won't be able to read these very easily, but I'll tell you what some of them are. The personal security, environmental equality, health status, education, income and wealth, jobs and earnings, and work-life balance. So there's a sort of an international comparison, if you like, for each country across each of those criteria. Next slide, please. Let's have a look at some other organisations then and see what they've been doing. And the Duke of Edinburgh Award is actually very proactive in this area. Although it's been in existence for over 60 years, it helps young people to build lifelong belief in themselves, which in itself increases well-being. It supports people to discover their own talents. And last year they introduced a new strategy, which was called Life Without Limits. And they wanted to demonstrate and measure that they make a real impact to people's lives. So they asked participants to reflect on their experience and what they learned. And they developed a set of questions, which includes the ONS measures of wellbeing that we reviewed earlier. This study is currently in the data collection phase, but I think I'm going to be very interested to see the results of this. Next slide, please. Now, churches, you know, whether you're religious or not, churches have a strong role to play in social cohesion, which might not surprise some people. So the total economic and social value that a church building can generate is at least 12.4 billion a year, averaging out at £300,000 a church. So there's money, 1.4 billion in the direct economic value created by running, staffing and hiring out church buildings, 200 million in the replacement costs of social and community services, 850 million in the replacement cost of volunteers' time, 165 million in well-being value to volunteers, 8.3 billion is the well-being value to the people who benefit from the social and community services. This is the single biggest source of value, and 1.4 billion, which is the well-being value of attending church services. So, religious or not, get along to church on a Sunday morning and see your well-being increase. It's rather interesting, though, isn't it? I think churches do a lot for cohesion in society. Next slide, please. So what are we doing within Citizens Advice? We calculate our value, our social value, in three main areas. There's the fiscal value. This is how much we save for local and national government due to fewer payments for out-of-work benefits, costly evictions, rehousing of evicted tenants, and less demand on the NHS, as we are doing with the Mental Health Ask project and saving GP time as one example. For public value, when people have got fewer problems, they've got higher levels of well-being. I think that's been the theme that's been running through today and emphasised by Dr. Richardson. Our calculation of public value also includes the value of a volunteer-run service, and as already been said, we value our volunteers very highly and we're very, very grateful to them. We couldn't run our service without our volunteers. And then finally, value to the people we help. We help individual clients to achieve their financial outcomes, for example, like getting backdated benefits, writing off debts and refunds for consumer issues. So that just gives you an overview of the social value that Citizens Advice Portsmouth sees its contribution to social value. I think that's me finished. Yeah. Oh, this is just a summary of data from National Citizens Advice that is collected nationally, but it shows that, you know, our funding that we gathered in the last financial year was 905,000. Our overall financial value to society, I won't read out all the figures, but the public value total we gathered, the value to the people we help. There's quite a complicated algorithm that our national organisation runs for us to be able to produce these social value numbers, and obviously not in this meeting, but if anyone's interested in finding out how that algorithm works, we're more than happy to share that openly with you. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Jan. I've made a measure of the Wellbe. I think I'm going to start measuring things in terms of Wellbe units. That's really interesting. I have to look into that. So if we move on, we should hopefully now have Sandy and Kim Taylor, who's our brilliant HR manager, and I'll hand over to you guys.
Thanks, Tom. Well, as you already know who I am, I'll just quickly pass to Kim to introduce herself. So if you could pop to the next slide.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kim Taylor. I'm the HR manager. I joined CAP in May 2021, initially on a 3-month contract. My HR experience spans well over 35 years in public and private sector. Born and bred in Portsmouth, and really enjoying the challenges that Citizens Advice are throwing at me at the moment.
Thanks, Kim. I think you've probably been lulled into a false sense of security, Kim, by the description of this section, a conversation, because I think it's probably more of an interrogation, as you'll see by the next slide. But I have a few questions for you.
Okay.
Are you ready?
As ready as I'll ever be, Sandy.
Brilliant. Okay, so question 1, what is employee wellbeing?
Well, from a perspective of how it is described, employee wellbeing refers to mental and emotional health of the employees. They say having a positive attitude and contentment at work for employees is one of the best things for their wellbeing. And they also say that anybody that embodies wellbeing at work holds a bright and optimistic perception of their work lives, which is great. Again, I think Karen referred to this in her section. The Gallup poll, the 5 pillars of wellbeing is career, social, financial, physical and community. And it's also a fundamental, wellbeing's a fundamental grounding for your mental stamina, emotional intelligence and resilience in the workplace. So I think that really goes into being the bedrock of the success of people, their performance, productivity and engagement and creativity. And it works well as long as the organisation supports that.
Yes, that's true. That's true. And we are obviously with you on board now doing our best to improve that area. Okay, so question 2. Who is responsible for employee wellbeing?
Right. Well, from a perspective as an employee and as a manager, I would say we are all responsible for our own wellbeing as much as an organisation is responsible for employee wellbeing. So we all have a certain responsibility to look after our own wellbeing, and that can be in how we talk to our employees, what processes we have in place, how we deal with issues within the workplace. It's about everybody working together. So it's being a community that supports each other, talks to each other, recognises if somebody is not performing or they have a concern about another employee, bringing that to the attention. So I think we are all responsible for wellbeing.
Thank you. Okay, so question 3, how does employee wellbeing impact on the organisation?
Right, well, I'll give you the positives first. Wellbeing improves motivation, which leads to higher productivity. Improved wellbeing and volunteer health reduces absences, so it reduces cost on sick pay and covering when or not being able to deliver your service. A healthy employee feels better and capable and more physical about performing their duties. We gain all sorts of additional support from those with really good well-being. The business itself and the organisation itself also gains because it's able to provide a better working culture for all of those that are working within the business. Negatives, there are very few negatives from adopting well-being, as we can see. But the issue is the cost of the organisation of being able to support with additional benefits, potentially to help promote wellbeing. But in the long term, I think the costs would be completely exonerated if you can prove that it's improved your attendance, your productivity, increased your ability to provide better services, and you've got a really good, loyal, which we have at Citizens Advice, loyal and productive team who want to help and keep the team and keep the business working well.
Yeah, I think we'd agree as a charity, we can't always offer the best benefits to our staff, but we've managed to find creative ways of doing that, haven't we, in the past year? And it has had an impact, and it hasn't been that expensive. So I wholeheartedly agree with that. Okay, so moving on to the next question. What are the essential elements for creating a healthy workplace?
Oh, well, that's a good one, I think. I think creating a healthy workplace, there are what I consider to be 3 main areas, and that is the organisational culture, the leadership of the organisation, and the way you manage your people. And if you've got those 3 working together and they're all supportive, that creates a very good wellbeing and engaged business, and the staff within it are also engaged and happy to support our processes as we go forward.
Okay, I'm just going to ask an additional question there because I'm curious. So you said about the leadership. So what makes good leadership in terms of healthy workplace?
I think visibility, their communication, being able to be spoken to if you've got an issue, so being approachable, understanding, not dismissing, because some people do dismiss. Managers, I've worked in companies where you've gone to a manager and said, oh, I've got an issue, and they've gone, yeah, well, I'm busy at the moment, don't worry about it, we'll talk about it later, and then it never gets done. So it's nice to be able to approach people. And I haven't been here as long as a lot of your management team have. And I have to say it's one of the better places that I've ever worked. The team are absolutely brilliant. The management are brilliant. The staff and the volunteers, I couldn't wish to work with a better group of people or team. So I would say that's what makes your the healthy working place. That makes it healthy. Being able to say if you're not feeling great, and having the support of your colleagues and the leadership team have to lead by example. They have to be what people look up to. You're leading the team, so if they don't feel that they can come to you with an issue, then that's going to cause even more problems.
Thank you. Yeah, that helps me to understand it a little better. And I will pay you later for those lovely comments. Thank you so much. Okay, so next question. What would you say the #1 reason is for poor well-being in employees?
I would say the #1 reason for poor wellbeing employees is the lack of visibility, and as I said before, visibility, transparency, communication, and also knowing that having clear duty roles, so as if they don't understand what their roles are properly, they tend to get very frustrated, they tend to get very upset, and sometimes if they feel that the goalposts are being moved too quickly and nobody is explaining why that's happening. So it's looking at all areas of their employment, and it's also being able to talk and know that they're being listened to, because there's nothing worse than somebody talking to you and you not listening to them, and you say, oh, I've heard what you've said, but you haven't really. And it's understanding if somebody's talking to you, trying to read between the lines of the problems that they are highlighting to you. Is it a workplace issue? Is it something external? And it's just really being open and honest with them and asking questions. As Jan brought up about the Ask project, it's no different with your employees. You ask them, you talk to them, you ask them how they're feeling. If you know somebody is not coping, you make it clear that they have channels to go through. I mean, we've got their Together All, we've also got their colleagues and their managers, and they've all got good relationships. I mean, I've been in so many briefings where we've had so many laughs and jokes about different things, and it's nice to have that support. And I think the #1 reason is the lack of communication within businesses and organisations, and I think within Citizens Advice Portsmouth, we are quite lucky that I would say we've got a really good open channel of communication, and I think people know, everybody, even the volunteers, know that they can come to us if they've got any issues, and we will do whatever we can to support them.
Yeah, thank you. I think communication, it's always the word that comes up, isn't it? And it's such a hard thing to master. And I think there's always things you can learn about communication. But yeah, it's always the number one thing that is raised, maybe how we communicate, how often we communicate. And I think we consistently have to work on getting that right, but it's important that we do keep working on it. Okay, so next question. During this pandemic, how have we as an organisation dealt with supporting employee wellbeing?
Well, as I say, I only come in 2021 and the pandemic was well underway by then. But we've done our best by keeping our staff safe, by having all our social distancing, doing our working from home. If people aren't feeling well, then we do what we can to permit them either to not work, or if they want to work but they don't feel they can get into the office, we will support their working from home. I think all the we've done the I got some theatre tickets that we sent out a message to for people just to say a thank you for all the work they've done. I think we as an organisation have dealt very, very well, and we've done our best to support whatever anyone's come back to us with, if they've had an issue or they want us to deal with something completely that's out the ballpark that we've not dealt with before. We've always looked at all options that we can have available to us. So I think as an organisation, I think Citizens Advice could literally put themselves up on a pedestal compared to other organisations.
That's a big claim. I think some of the things that we've discovered, haven't they, have been that opportunities to socialise at work have been really important.
Yes.
Sort of encouraging getting to know your colleagues better and encouraging friendships in the workplace has also been something we've sort of focused on, haven't they?
Yeah, and I do a monthly email out to people just asking if everybody's okay, and we have our weekly briefings that people can come into, and sometimes we'll do the briefing and we'll still all stay online and we'll have a chat about how things are going. So it's keeping everybody connected, because it's been very hard during the pandemic to do that with all businesses, and I think it's keeping that connection together. And even though, I mean, if I had to put my hand on heart, I haven't met anybody at Citizens Advice in bodily face-to-face meetings yet because of the pandemic, and it's been really funny how my relationships with my colleagues and employees and the trustees and the volunteers has grown. So it's not about being remote or distance, it's about engaging with everybody and making sure that everybody knows they can engage with you.
Yeah, I agree. I think we should mention as well one of our wonderful volunteers, Karen, who created Cap Chit Chat for us as well, didn't they?
Yes.
So we send out a monthly communication, which is, it communicates our successes, our performances, but it also communicates little things, the individual things about each other, and any news from any of our colleagues, which help us stay in touch with each other. Yeah,
we congratulate people on their birthdays, and we sometimes have these pictures, or I've seen pictures of people's flowers in the gardens when in the summer, and when people have gone on holiday they put pictures in, pictures of doggies like your little dash outs.
Absolutely.
And I know that when I lost my dog back in the summer, everybody was so supportive, and I know you didn't want to put pictures up of your dog because you knew I'd lost mine, and I said to you no. So it's nice that people consider other people's feelings, and I think within this particular organisation, everybody considers everyone's feelings and supports them as much as possible. And it's just like I do every morning, I just type in good morning to people on Teams. And some people answer sometimes, Sandy.
Is that the point where we move on to the next question?
but we have and we have chats, and during the day, if we know that there's something we want to talk about, and that is important. That is really important, especially during this time, because I don't like using this word because they keep on using it. During this unprecedented situation, it has caused a lot of people to feel isolated, lonely, and yes, it has impacted on people's mental health and well-being and their physical health and well-being. And some people just can't cope with that. And it's nice to know that you've got a team here that you can just sort of message them and say, oh, I'm not feeling great today. And they'll come back and go, oh, do you want to have a chat? And it's great that you can either get on the phone or you can do a chat through the Teams. And that is very important. That is vital to ensure that we are keeping in contact with everybody and making sure that we're aware of people's situations and can help if we can.
Lovely. Yeah, thanks, Kim. I agree. Okay, so you'll be pleased to know this is the last question. How do we plan to support our employee wellbeing in 2022?
Well, going forward, I think we've still got to carry on with what we're doing, but we've got to look at how other initiatives that are coming out. We've got to look at how we can put new, maybe processes in place to help. I mean, I know we've just put the new menopause policy in place, which a lot of people were very excited about. We've put the new health and wellbeing policy out. It's keeping everybody alert, making sure that they're fully aware of wellbeing and ensuring that they look after their own well-being as much as others, because this is quite a pressurized role that people do here.
Absolutely.
We support a lot of vulnerable people in the community, and that can take its toll on the people that are delivering the service. You know, as we've heard some really good case studies and really good outcomes and things like that, but we need to be aware that not every case may end as well as some of those, and we may have to deal with people in really, really dire situations. And we've got to be prepared as a team and as our colleagues and as a family, I would like to say, that we need to be able to support each other if we are having a really bad day, or we've had a really bad situation and we haven't been able to cope with that. So it's looking at all those things. We also need to learn about disconnecting. We need to be able to separate our work and home lives. And I know that I'm saying I'm preaching this because I'm just as bad as everybody else about doing additional hours and answering emails when you're not supposed to be and taking your time out. And I know we all do it, and anybody that doesn't, I would like to challenge on that. But it's knowing when to stop and when to say enough is enough. And it's being able to do that without feeling like you're letting anybody down. And I think that is important. And the other thing that I think that that causes a lot of organisations to fail with wellbeing is that they do not incorporate it in everything they do, and they will pay lip service to it and they won't follow up on it. And I think we have, because as you said, we've brought in some small changes, and we've enhanced our holiday, and we're looking at other things that we can do that will not be mega costs to the business, but it will help to show the employees that they are valued, they are essential to our business and our volunteers, because the volunteers do an absolutely fantastic job, and we have to ensure that we continue to promote that throughout 2022 and further. You know, well-being is essential to any business, and it will make the business grow and be successful.
Thanks, Kim. I agree with you. I mean, that is the thing. Without our teams, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. So that's our most important resource, and we need to look after it. And that will be, as we say, our focus moving into 2022.
And my focus will be to make sure that you have a centre of excellence for your HR, and that we have all the best practices in place to support our fantastic teams.
Lovely. Thank you, Kim. Really interesting, and I hope that's been informative for everyone else. Okay, I'm going to pass back to Tom.
Okay, yep, thank you for that. Really interesting talk. I have noticed there are some questions in the chat, but what we'll do is, it's okay, we'll save, and I'll make sure we'll come to that before the end of the conference. So now I'm hoping that Lizzie is on board and she's able to say hi, so I know you're there.
Hello, hi everybody.
Brilliant.
My name's Lizzie.
Lizzie. I think we could either give you control, or I can just go through the slides and you can go next slide, please, whatever your preference is.
I can go next slide, please. Let's do that.
Shall we do that? Well, in that case, I'll come off camera and leave you to it. Thank you very much.
Fab, thank you very much. Hello everybody, my name's Lizzie. I'm a Community Sports Development Manager for BH Live. We run sports and leisure facilities across Portsmouth, but almost Bournemouth and Poole. I've been kind of working in the health and wellbeing / sports coaching industry for about 10 years. Through kind of various projects, initiatives, a lot including health and wellbeing. And I've also seen how active communities and being active can help on an individual level. I joined Shaping Portsmouth in 2019 to become a chair on the Workplace Health and Wellbeing project. We've got some amazing members on our team, and we want to be able to create kind of a set of sustainable programs to support any size business in the city to help keep their workforce happy and healthy. Shaping Portsmouth, just a little bit of background. I know I've got Ashley and maybe a few others, staff as well on the call, but it's a non-for-profit company whose vision is to make Portsmouth the UK's leading city to invest, live, learn, work and visit. Hopefully I've done you guys proud for that. Kim has pretty much smashed through a lot of what I will be talking about today. Next slide, please. Next slide. Perfect. So we spend more than 42 hours a week at work, 5 hours longer than our Danish cousins. So obviously a lot of our time is spent at work. So it's important to think about our health and well-being at work. And obviously we all should take care of each other in that respect. The importance of preventative health has been highlighted recently, especially during COVID and pre-COVID. Employers are well-placed to make a big difference by driving positive behaviours such as regular health checks, encouraging taking breaks, nutritional advice and increased physical activity. So I will be talking about the impacts of workplace health and wellbeing and also what the future holds post COVID-19, because it's important that the landscape has changed and we are all aware of that. I'll be kind of asking the question, have workplaces changed their priority list? And that's definitely the case. Next slide, please. So what does a healthy workplace mean? So obviously we know the 5 pillars to well-being, but what does an actual healthy workplace look like? There are 4 aspects that we must consider. So mitigating safety concerns. So this particular pillar or post is prevalent in manufacturing and labour-intensive jobs. So, for example, groundsmen, is there kind of risks in place that you can help mitigate those risks? But also it can be prevalent when it comes to desk jobs as well. Does your company make health and safety part of their culture? Do we make sure that all desks are also suitably organised for each staff member? We do know that musculoskeletal conditions, including back pain, neck pain, and upper limb problems, causes 28.2 million days lost. So that's 21% of sickness absences. So there's a lot there that we can do to help with those safety concerns. And later on in the presentation, we will battle some of those aspects. So workplace culture, this is a huge part in which Kim touched upon, and it's really good to see Citizens Advice actually implementing a lot of stuff for their employees. But what are the company's missions and values? Does the company follow their own beliefs, behaviours, attitudes? What are the line managers' attitudes towards health and wellbeing? And also, most importantly, do your employees have a say, which is obviously extremely important. So in terms of staff wellbeing concerns, stress and mental health is a huge part, and Dr. Richardson touched on those. The mental health side, financial wellbeing, again, such a huge part of those wellbeing concerns, and financial wellbeing, obviously post-COVID, is really highlighted to be quite difficult. We've obviously got mental health conditions as well. We've got stress, depression, anxiety. This resulted in 11.54% of sickness absences. So 3 out of 5 employees experience a mental health condition because of work. So that's actually quite high. Personal health resources. So this is another aspect that we have to consider. So in terms of personal stuff, I'm obviously quite engaged in terms of physical activity. So does that particular individual have access to being active? Counselling as well, occupational health services, and also food. What are people eating? Because that obviously has an impact on their sleep patterns, on their activity. Obesity levels are a huge problem at the moment. So there's a lot there that kind of links in together. We could include people who have a disability or long-term health condition as well. So that's a huge part of going to work. A lot of people do have hidden illnesses, and developing line manager knowledge about those illnesses does currently remain a challenge. And surprisingly, I love a statistic, so I will go through quite a few of these today. But just 42% of people say their organisation have a supportive line management style that treats people as individuals. So this is pre-COVID, and I will talk through the differences as part of that. Next question, please. Next slide, sorry, please. I was copying him then. This might be a silly question to ask, but why is workplace health and wellbeing so important to businesses, to individuals? And the answer is pretty simple, a lot. So as you can see, there's a huge cycle here in terms of the benefits and also the economic development as well. So it's a simple question to ask, but let's just highlight what it can help with. So it reduces absences. So obviously it can reduce absences by 42%. So if you are supporting your current employees, 42% is quite high. It improves productivity, so it helps issues become quickly resolved. Simply by eliminating that stress, that worry, it can lead to an instant boost in productivity levels. It reduces staff turnover. Obviously, time is money. Takes time to hire new staff, takes time and money to retrain. So why not look after the current staff that you have? It's so important. Customer satisfaction. I used to work in a restaurant, and we used to have a saying, it's the people that make the chicken. So if your staff are happy, then they will put the love and care into those products. And therefore they will keep their customers happy. No guesses as to where I used to work, but it was an amazing company, and a lot of stuff that they implemented. Their values were really strong in terms of making sure that they put the staff first, because at the end of the day, you then get your repeat customers. Also the lack of costs associated, that's a huge thing, links in with time as money. So there is some costs that Kim did mention earlier in terms of purchasing, perhaps wellbeing programs, purchasing counselling, that kind of stuff, or health plans. There are some costs associated, but actually throughout my presentation, you'll see there's little things that we can do to make a big difference. And I think that's quite key. Next slide, please. So we, as part of Shaping Portsmouth, put together in partnership with Energise Me, who are our county sports partner. So they look after health and physical activity in Hampshire. And everyone loves some statistics. I'm hoping you're all able to see these, but don't strain your eyes too much. We put together some statistics that I'd quite like you just to have a little look through. I'll give you a minute to read these statistics. These are locally and nationally as well. Are there any particular ones which might shock you? If you could write these into the chat for me. It's really highlighting in terms of the problems that we do face as businesses. The ones that particularly shocked us, and we put this out to 42 businesses in Portsmouth, and the deaths caused by physical activity was a huge shock. And the amount of time British people do sit per day is another huge shock. So I'll give you a minute just to read through them. And if you could comment in the chat box, anything which particularly surprises you, anything which you weren't aware of, that would be amazing. I'll give you a minute just to do that. Was anyone particularly shocked by any of these? If you could raise your hand as well. Thank you, Tom. Thanks, Sandy. So 4.2 million lost through back pain. That's such a huge part. Obviously, manufacturing industries tend to report the most days lost throughout back pain. You've also got groundsmen as well, who do report a lot of those numbers. Also, things like getting someone to double check occupational health in regards to looking at desk, how you're working. Obviously, we're all working from home now, a lot of us. So what is our work setup like from home? Thank you. Thank you, Lucy. Thank you, Sandy. Yeah, surprising about the mental health days lost. It's such a huge part at the moment, and we are more aware of mental health now more than we ever have been. So it would be interesting to see that safer mental health culture. I'll talk through a little bit about that later. Thanks, Andy. About 53% reporting stress. And obviously during COVID as well. Perfect. Thank you, everybody, for taking part in that. It's just, we actually put this out to 42 businesses in Portsmouth, and a lot of them had answered questions about this, and they were actually really shocked as to a lot of these. Some of these weren't particularly shocked in terms of what's happening in their businesses. Some of them say, yeah, actually, this sounds about right, and they weren't actually too shocked, but then it's putting something in place to be able to prevent that as well. Thank you, Payman. Yeah, that particularly shocked me a lot, coming from a physical activity and really active background. 8.9 hours average time British people sit per day. That was a huge shock, and businesses were actually quite taken back by that as well. I'm quite passionate about physical activity, which many of you may or may not know, but I do have a coaching background, so I'm quite active during my day, but that was something that was quite shocking. Perfect, thanks everyone. So next slide, please. So you might have to click a few times for this one, but if you could click once for me, yeah, perfect. So I'm just going to go through pre-lockdown statistics to compare pre and post-lockdown, and what businesses have currently changed on their agenda. But 61% of businesses had employee wellbeing on their agenda. That was pre-lockdown, so a lot of them actually said that they were particularly keen on the importance of workplace health and wellbeing, what that meant to their business. Next little click, please. So 58% of senior leaders have said they will buy into the importance of wellbeing. So Kim mentioned previously about costs, and there's a huge part to say in terms of the importance of buying into that. Next click, please. So public sector organisations are the most proactive in wellbeing, although most of these, to be honest, most of these organisations are actually under the most pressure. So we have people in the education, police, fire and healthcare sector / organisations who are under the most pressure. So intervention, you would argue, is probably necessary in terms of the high staff turnover levels. So yeah, that's kind of not too much of a shock in terms of that, but actually it shows that hopefully businesses are doing something to help. Next slide, please. Next click, sorry. So pre-lockdown, most companies found their employees were off due to long-term health conditions as well as mental health. This isn't potentially too much of a change compared to now, but I was quite shocked in terms of long-term health conditions and how managers are managing that within their business. Obviously back conditions, that being one, but also a lot of people do have mobility considerations, how they should have their desk, that kind of stuff. So there's a lot to it in terms of the mental health side, but long-term health conditions as well. And actually Simply Health, Championing Better Work and Working Lives along with Simply Health did actually some research around this and about managers having that knowledge around long-term health conditions, because that's another thing where perhaps we don't take the time to sit down and learn about what people's long-term health conditions are. Do people disclose them? So there's issues around that as well, which I will talk about a little bit later. Next slide, please. So post-lockdown, obviously we had COVID, a lot of people were off work, a lot of people had to change their ways of working, and there's a lot of wellbeing factors that were pre-COVID compared to post-COVID that we now need to consider. COVID has changed a lot for businesses, we are all aware of that, but previously we had 61% of businesses who had employee wellbeing on their agenda, and it's now moved to 75%. So this was a questionnaire done by Championing Better Lives, and they did a questionnaire pre-COVID and post-COVID with 250 businesses. So 75% now say that they're thinking about employee well-being post-lockdown, and more businesses, that's 83% of businesses, are offering tailored support as well. So it shows that there has been a shift, and many businesses are bringing that up on their agenda a little bit more in terms of workplace health and well-being. We also found that 67% of businesses, senior leaders to be precise, have said that they would buy into the importance of well-being. So that was pre-COVID 58%, so you can see a shift in the percentages there. There are still other factors to consider that have been a health and well-being issue for staff, but now more than ever. Like I said, the poll, which was done by Management Today and a few other organisations, said 87% say they have experienced increased numbers of staff disclosing issues around poor mental health, and 82% saying they've seen a greater number of staff reporting feelings of loneliness. Obviously most of us have now changed our ways to working from home. And this in terms of this has changed some wellbeing factors and some shifts. So obviously you're used to that busy and bustling environment, but you've now gone to them working from home. There isn't as many people around in the office. So that has made it quite a lonely place. But research has found the following pointers to combat loneliness. So wellbeing is obviously key, values are vital as well, and the provision of technology, which is something which people might not have access to. There was a lot of stuff done when children had to learn from home. They didn't have tablets, they didn't have that kind of stuff to be able to then access those learning from home. So that was quite difficult for a lot of individuals, a lot of students as well. They might not have had access to Teams or Zoom. So the provision of technology is really important to help combat loneliness. And effective communication as well. So that's key, coming from line managers and communicating and talking to their employees, even though they're in separate areas now. It's quite key to have those catch-ups and think about having weekly, monthly, however that looks for your business. But those catch-ups are really important to feel like you're included as well, because I personally didn't work from home. I was put on furlough for 2 years. And then I have to do a lot of my face-to-face delivery, but I can imagine, obviously with loneliness, it can be quite difficult. Obviously, Dr. Richardson did touch on money problems affecting a lot of people, so financial stress. This is no matter the level of pay as well. So no matter how much you are paid in your business, you can still have that financial stress. So it's worth thinking about. Money problems cost the UK economy 120 billion per year, and 17.5 million hours are lost, taken off of work because of this financial stress. So that's a lot of money. Excuse the pun, but it's a lot of money. And financial well-being, unfortunately, still remains a neglected area. Nearly a quarter, or 23%, report their organisation has increased their focus on financial well-being. And there are only small improvements in activity to promote financial well-being. So a lot of businesses do signpost to external sources of advice, Citizens Advice being one as well as other businesses. This can remain quite a hard area. Employees can support though through other types of support, access to regulated advice, financial products, services, perhaps cost reduction schemes. Personally at BH Live, we're part of a health plan, and they will pay for dental procedures. I obviously have to keep myself quite active and fit, and I sprained my ankle a few years ago, so I had to go through a rehab process. They helped me pay for that, which was obviously quite expensive. So there's a lot of stuff businesses can do as part of that. Perhaps travel card or discounted memberships to gyms, to other areas. We at BH Live do a corporate membership, so we give discounts to businesses in the city to access all of our sites across Portsmouth. And discounted other travel card means as well. So obviously travelling to work is another cost to a lot of organisations and businesses and individuals. The findings also show an encouraging fall in the proportion that report their organisation is a much more reactive than proactive. So it's 27% down compared to 40% last year. Nearly half of businesses still lack some kind of formal strategy. So again, going back to the 4 aspects that I was touching on earlier, the mitigating those safety concerns is something that we might have to think about. Public sector organisations are most proactive. As I said, you do have the most stress going through the NHS, going through fire departments, education departments. So they are the most proactive in wellbeing, which is encouraging to see. But there's still a huge part that we can all play. Next slide, please. Perfect. So I would not be practicing what I preach unless we did do a little bit of exercise in this presentation. Obviously, this is my background. This is what I'm passionate about, and you can also implement it in business too. So obviously, I have quite a bit of room to do physical activity. But if you don't, I have 2 options. I've got seated exercises and standing exercises. If you do have a health condition, you should seek medical advice before you exercise, and please exercise at your own risk. So as I said, I've developed 2 exercises that we can do. So first of all, you can do this seated or you can do it standing, completely up to you. I'm going to show you behind chair 2 options. So first one we're going to do is marching. So this is where you do high knees on the spot. It's just a nice gentle exercise just to get your heart racing, hoping you're all joining in. It's a shame I can't see you all. But let's get those arms moving. We're going to go for 30 seconds. If you were seated, you're just going to simply raise your legs up and down for me. Okay, are we ready? 3, 2, 1, off we go. So raising that heart rate for me. You can do this as slow as you want to. It's important that we do keep moving, especially when we're considering that well-being within our workforce. We do know it has a lot of physical activity has a lot of positives in terms of mental health, forgetting about your task list that you have to do and just getting active. You can also speak to people as well whilst you're doing it. 3, 2, 1, and stop there. Well done. Next exercise we'll do is calf raises. So you're going to go onto your tippy toes, nice and gentle. You can see me kind of lifting there. Sorry, I have a table in front of me, so you might not be able to see. You can do this seated. You can hold onto your chair doing calf raises. Seated, you can do calf raises, lifting your knees up a little bit and getting onto those toes. So are we ready? 3, 2, 1, off we go. So calf raises up, 30 seconds. I normally have my hands in front or just to the side, wherever you feel comfortable. Again, if you're seated, you can do this seated, just rolling onto your toes and just lifting up. So this is activating your calf muscle, keeping them awake, keeping that blood pumping as well. Hopefully your heart rate's gone up a little bit from your marching. I know mine has. Perfect, keep going. 3, 2, 1, and stop there. Well done. Next one we're going to do is side taps. So you're just going to really gently bring your foot out, alternating each side. You can also do this seated. So bringing your leg out to the side and back. So we're going to do that again for 30 seconds. You ready? 3, 2, 1, off we go. To the side and back. Lovely. Well done. Keep it going, everyone. So bring it out to the side, bringing your foot back. Nice. Well done. Make sure you keep moving. Perfect. So like I said, if you are in a cramped office, the office environment is a bit too much. You can do this seated as well. You can do some gentle exercises. 3, 2, 1, and stop there. Well done. Next one we're going to do, last one, and we're going to do some boxing. So you're just going to bring your arms forward, like so. You can do this seated, bringing your arms forward on each, okay? Are we ready? 3, 2, 1, off we go. So punching forward. Well done. Hopefully you're all doing this with me. Might be in front of the camera, but hopefully we can all feel the benefits of this. Well done, punching forward, not too long left, keep it going. Well over halfway. Nice job, well done. Almost there. 3, 2, 1, and stop there, well done. Perfect, so we will stop there. You can make this harder or easier, and you can add resistance bands, that kind of stuff as well. We are running over slightly, so I will get a move on, as this slide says. But obviously, physical activity isn't the be-all and end-all, but it certainly can help someone to forget about work for 10, 15, 20 minutes, and also put their focus on somewhere else. But also, it's important for your physical and mental health and overall health in general. So that's kind of what I'm passionate about, bringing it into that conversation. It can reduce blood pressure and help manage certain health conditions, and it also helps you to sleep, which can be necessary for the next working day. Sorry, I'm kind of out of breath. I don't know about you guys. You can find some videos on YouTube as well, seated chair exercises. And we also plan on launching something for Shaping Portsmouth, and it'll be on their website soon, so you can follow that. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to quickly rush through some of the things that we can do to help in terms of the 4 aspects that I was referring to earlier. So in terms of mitigating health and safety concerns, thinking about risk assessments, it is boring, but it's necessary for a business. Thinking about handling regulations, thinking about manual handling. So actually, how do you lift properly? How does it prevent that back pain? Also COSH, so this is managing chemicals and how that looks in terms of your workplace. Also workplace culture and thinking about returning to work policies. Does your company do this? So after you're ill, does your line manager come over and actually have that meeting before you come back to work and say, how can we help in terms of sickness? Is it a long-term health condition? So there's no shame in asking. I just feel like it's healthy to have that conversation. Is there pre-leave handovers, and what are your managers' attitudes towards health and wellbeing? Like I said, we have a health plan as part of our company, which is amazing, which helps with dental and also therapy as well. So kind of thinking about the future and managing that. So staff wellbeing concerns, training, mental health first aid, which there's quite a few courses going around at the moment. Ergonomics, so testing your computer and desk screen and desk space at home. There's also been attitudes towards flexible working, especially post-lockdown, and referring on to other services. And then the last one, personal health resources. So this is things such as the intranet and also taking the stairs instead of the lift at work. Every little helps. We did manage to visit Portsmouth City Council actually, and we told a guy to take the stairs. And it kind of improved his health and well-being. We kind of had a sit down with him and areas in which he wanted to work. And he said that his statistics were quite weak. So we did peak flow, we tested his fitness, and then we told him take the stairs more, be a bit more active. He actually lost 3 stone. His peak flow capacity had increased, his lung capacity, and he was just such an amazing shape. And he said that mentally he felt in a better place. A lot of these issues do link in with each other as well. So this slide, we actually did a questionnaire to 42 businesses in the city, and we asked them what would a health and wellbeing programme look like for you. And these are some of the resources that they said might actually help them. We did actually train some workplace health and wellbeing champions. So we sent them on a MEC training course, which is making every conversation count. And in terms of goal setting, this was a really good course, and it helped them to help their employees goal set. This isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. Many businesses operate differently, and we do have to think about the different size businesses there are, but these are just some of the examples of that.
Sorry, Lizzie, we're probably going to have to cut a little bit because we've run into some time. Are you all right if we send this out post for the session for everyone so they can have a look?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I know that's absolutely fine. No problem.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that. I, for one, feel a bit fitter. Probably my neighbours are wondering what I'm doing running up and down on the spot.
Yeah, I know. Hopefully our neighbours weren't looking in,
but that was really appreciated. Thank you very much for that. And we'll make sure all of this goes out as well with the slides. So I'm going to try and incorporate some calf raises in my day.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me, everyone.
Cheers. Thank you, Lizzie. Thank you very much. So look, thank you to all our speakers. I'm going to hand over finally to Steph, who is our chair here at Citizens Advice Portsmouth, as well as for Shaping Portsmouth, just to round up the conference to say, I know there's been a few questions. I'll probably make sure we capture that and we'll respond to people outside of this. I think will be the best bet time-wise. So it's the last you'll hear from me today, and I'll hand over to Steph. Thank you very much.
Tom, thank you very much indeed. Hopefully everyone can hear me, and I will need help just to sort of go through the couple of slides I've got to wrap this outstanding session up. And and I hope when we do the feedback, we'll get some lessons that we'll learn about what we can do it differently, better next time. But also, I just want to congratulate everybody, because I think it's been an absolutely outstanding and thought-provoking morning. And I know Sandy may come on at the end and do it, but Tom, thanks to you, my friend, brand new trustee. You've made a massive impact on the board, and you've also made a massive impact today with your professionalism and the way you've handled this morning. So thank you, Tom, very, very much indeed. So I guess most of you know me. I know we've got about 40 people left here, and most of you have said know exactly my 2 roles I have. It's Shaping and obviously Citizens Advice. January marks the 4th anniversary of my chairmanship of this wonderful organisation and board, and I just wanted to take a couple of moments around, to reinforce the messages I've got. And I guess because it's always very relevant, my very good friend is a guy called Mick Devereux, and for 30 odd years, he was the Portsmouth North Social Services manager and had an absolutely incredible impact on that part of the city. And the phrase he always used to say to me was, "Who cares for the carers?" And I just want you to kind of take that saying away with you this weekend, because very often you individually look after other people and you always mind out for them and look out for them, but who looks out for you? And I just think it's very relevant at this point in time that as your manager looks down on you to make sure you're okay, please turn that mirror the other way around and make sure that you ask your manager or your chief officer how they are as well, because as I said, who cares for the carers? But well-being, I mean, I'm very proud that Lizzie is the shaping program leader for employee health and wellbeing. Clearly, that program has stuttered over the COVID lockdowns, but I know that in 2022 we're going to do an awful lot. It is incredibly important. I, outside of work, look after an 86-year-old widow who lost her husband of 63 years last year, and all of those things that just happened, suddenly she didn't know, how they would work. So her mental well-being took an absolute nosedive because she just simply didn't know how to operate, or how to pay the council tax bill, or how to renew the insurance on the house or the car or whatever it might have been. And her well-being suffered greatly. And if we could just make sure that we simplify anything we do, whether it's that debt advice or that Macmillan advice or that personal sort of immigration advice, it's better because the person then just feels one, of that piece of that weight is lifted from their shoulders. You guys do it day in, day out to a brilliant level. And all I want to make sure that Kim and Sandy do is make sure you're okay, but we've got to make sure that Kim and Sandy are okay too, because you look after people and we try and look after you. Second bullet talks about our aims. I think you all know exactly what our aims are. And we have a pretty diverse community in Portsmouth. If you don't know, we have over 100 different languages spoken in the city. It's 250,000 people only, and yet we've got over 100 different languages and different origins of people in our city. And that will increase as the world becomes a bit more of a global, immigration and a global asylum seeking sense. The UK is, as you know, a magnet for a number of the poorer countries. Jan talked about social value. I want to give you my perspective of this. Social value is going to be a thing you'll hear a lot more about going forward. And there are two main ways of measuring the social value you are having on your clients. One of them is you can go down the social housing route that ABRI and Vivid have done, whereby the National Housing Association puts a monetary value on an activity. So if ABRI or Vivid get one of their residents into part-time work, there's a value of, say, £5,000 added to that. It's a theoretical value. It's not it's not a real value. If they get them in full-time work, it's worth 27,000, whatever. And every year, ABRI and Vivid literally measure the social value they have on their residents by this monetary matrix. For me, at Shaping and my team, we measure outcomes. So effectively, if you take any of our programs, and one of them I'll talk about is the Rough Sleepers program, where the Society of St James is running 3 buildings in the city, and up to 110 rough sleepers will be housed there. What Shaping and its partners are doing is starting to work with each rough sleeper that wants a pathway to employment, and we are going to move those rough sleepers hopefully through and onto a better existence. And therefore, each time we affect their particular life by their particular education course they might go on, a bit of a CV writing course, an interview, hopefully a job. We are going to measure that as an activity, and we're going to measure that as an outcome. And we're going to be talking a lot more about this at the Shaping Conference next week. So social value is the impact you have, whether I have it on the lovely Jill Skidmore, who's 86, by just calming down her particular nerves around her income and her outgoings, or whether it's something that you do in one of your many services you give to the residents of our city. It's going to be here, and it's going to be something we do. And again, you know, we talk about return on investment, the last bullet before I wrap up. It's so hard to actually financially measure the effect you are having on this city. But all I know is that the respect that you are all held in, the respect in which the brand is held in, the activities that the brand are being asked to get involved in, the sheer project involvement, you are simply the first name that people think about when they think about, you know, how we can help residents of our city. And the activities we've got planned, you know, will just, you know, further support that. And you may have seen some of those announcements already. But you know, from today, it's been absolutely outstanding. All of the speakers, internal and external, have been fantastic. And I want to pick up just one last point. And we talked about, you know, the people's mental situation. We talked about shame. We've talked about things like that. It is important to understand as well that with inflation running at 5.4%, that is, in my book, running one household a lie, because I'm seeing my utility bills and my mobile phone bills and my other bills going up by 9, 10, 11 and 12%. So I think with Wendy, you know, and certainly with Andrew, our lovely RNC trustee, the research and campaign antenna has to be really tuned in this year, because I can see there being a really important change in people's economic wealth, and therefore I think that we will be sitting on a time bomb that will be ticking for that mental issues, and, you know, more people coming to our doors. So inflation really worries me, because I think it's going to create a debt problem in the next 12 months. But if I can go to, I think, my last slide, which really is an extract from our annual report, and really it just, you know, it's meant in every word is thought about, and every word is carefully, you know, meant for me personally. From Sandy to the rest of this team here, to those that are no longer with us and those that have recently joined us, you are simply a wonderful set of individuals. As I said, I've just, you know, sort of finished my 4th year as the chair of trustees. We've talked about trustees before. We've got a few of them on the team here today. I am blessed with the team that meets every quarter and invests their time in what you do. I'm blessed by our leadership team that we have in the organisation, and simply the people who come and stay or come and leave. You all contribute significantly, and I can't think of a better place to be than the Citizens Advice Portsmouth, because what we do for people, you know, is invaluable. And all I want to do is thank you for everything you do. Thank you.